Well, the Constitutional Court is today expected to rule whether the controversial CPS should continue to pay welfare grants for a further 6 months.
Those are environmental swabs and not product swabs. So there's no direct link yet to the product.
But Tiger Brands remains defiant despite evidence linking its products to the deadly Listeriosis outbreak. The Public Protector Busisiwe Mqobane will have her work cut out when she appears before Parliament's Justice Committee today. Very good morning to you. Well, welcome to SABC's Newsroom. I'm Shante Yankis. We're coming to you live from Auckland Park in Johannesburg. Thank you very much for joining us. A lot coming up between now and 12 p.m, including the latest on the Listeriosis crisis. We'll also have some sporting headlines coming up just before 9:30. Your top story, the Constitutional Court is expected to rule today on the request from the Social Security Agency to have its controversial contract with Cash Paymaster Services to pay welfare grants to millions of beneficiaries extended by another 6 months. Well, the contract between the current service provider CPS and Sassa, which began in 2012, was declared invalid by the Constitutional Court in 2014. In March last year, the court suspended its ruling for the second time until the 31st of this month. This is to allow for the continuation of payment of grants and to give Sassa time to appoint a new grants distributor. Well, since then, Sassa has partly struck deals with the Post Office set to take over grant payments. A Tiger Brands CEO Lawrence McDougall says that there is no direct link between the outbreak of Listeriosis and their products. McDougall says the Department of Health found a strand of Listeria in the environment, but not necessarily in their products. He spoke to SABC News earlier today.
From the announcement in December that Listeriosis had been raised by the Department of Communicable Diseases, obviously, we started taking precautions in our factories and started working through all of our units with increased testing protocols and also making sure that the environment was clean for us to operate. We had a visit by the regulators in January in our factory, and they took over 400 swabs through our factory. So we've been working very, very close with them. We took our own swabs after that visit as well. And through the middle of January and February, we obviously worked with them very, very closely. So we've been working very closely with all the regulators through our factory and as things have evolved. Yeah. So yes, we have.
Where does the discrepancy come in, where you at this point are saying that you don't get the link from your manufacturing plants to the death of these 181 South Africans?
So where we are at the moment is that the Minister on Sunday informed us that there was a link, that what they found in some of these swabs that they took in our factory, there was evidence of ST6 strain in our factory, and that's a similar strain that they apparently have found in some of the tests that they've done on some consumers. Those are environmental swabs and not product swabs. So there's no direct link yet to the product and those people that got ill. Those are not related to deaths at all. So those are people that got sick from that. That was also a basket of products, not only Tiger Brands products. Mm-hmm. So at this stage... Are you
disputing their findings? I mean,
not at all. No, not at all.
Because it sounds like in a way you are.
No, we're not. So we're working very, very closely with them. We haven't seen the results yet. We've asked the Minister and the department to share those results with us.
So as today, I mean, these were released. I mean, a big warning SMS came out to the media on Sunday night. Yes. I beg your pardon, Saturday night, saying that there would be a press briefing at 12 o'clock on Sunday afternoon. Here we sit on Tuesday morning and you're saying you still don't have those results from the department.
We don't have. What we have received at 12:35 on Sunday is a notice from the NCC, the National Consumer Council, that they had 3 products that they would like us to withdraw. Frankfurter's Polony and Russian sausages.
Yeah.
Those are the 3 products that they've identified that potentially have strains. What we've done, though, is we've been very, very proactive. Even with that information that we have, we immediately shut down both our Polokwane plant and our Germiston plant, just to make sure that we're protecting the consumer. So we shut the plants down, we stopped deliveries of all products. We've also undertaken a full recall of those products out of the market, just to be prepared. So we're not waiting for the results. We're not waiting for more communications. We met with the NCC yesterday. Yeah. They agreed to share those results with us and share more information with us. And we're hopefully going to get those later today. Yeah. So we've been very, very proactive to make sure that the product is withdrawn. We had the press briefing yesterday, our meeting with you today, Indeed. To make sure that the consumer is very, very aware of what's going on, and that we've been proactive. So, you know, I don't want to...
I'm going to dispute you on the proactive side because, and perhaps you can dispute this finding, but is it not true that on the 14th of February, results already came through showing that there were slight traces in these products with listeriosis? 18 days later, it took the Department of Health to make a major announcement for you to recall these products. Did you already know 18 days ago that there was a trace? Just a trace.
So listeria is found generally in the environment, and I think the Health Minister and many other regulatory bodies and yourselves have put out that knowledge to consumers that listeria is found in our environment. Through the testing code protocols and the standards that we have, when you test below 100 CFUs per gram, that's effectively seen as non-detectable, and even below 10. So yes, we did find some traces of listeria, but it was very, very low levels and below 10. Historically, that would have not been a concern at all. As we've worked with the health department, we've said that potentially these new strains might be more aggressive, and therefore we wanted to do. So when we met with them in February, we said, listen, this is what is starting to happen. We've increased our protocols, we've increased our testing, we're increasing our standards, we're improving our standards. And if we do find those low levels, whereas we haven't in the past, but we are going to start recalling those products. And where we did on one particular product, we did withdraw it out of the market. But it was at very, very low levels, would have not necessarily been harmful to humans to consume.
Yeah.
Well, one of the leaders of the controversial Mangoba Seven Angels Ministry is expected to appear in the Engcobo Magistrates Court in the Eastern Cape this morning. Banene Mangoba is facing charges of rape, sexual exploitation and sexual grooming. The crimes were allegedly committed inside the church. Mangoba was arrested over the weekend alongside 2 others inside the premises of the Seven Angels Ministries Church. The arrest follows an ongoing investigation into the murder of 5 police officers and a soldier in Engcobo more than a week ago. Well, 7 men were shot and killed inside the church following a gun battle after police stormed the church acting on a tip-off. Some other news, Nelson Mandela Bay Mayor Athol Trollip says he's unfazed by the EFF's planned motion of no confidence in him. Well, the EFF plans to table the motion on the 6th of next month in an effort to punish the DA for refusing to vote with the EFF in Parliament. Well, this was during a debate on the motion of land expropriation without compensation. Trollip says the DA doesn't have a problem with becoming an opposition party in the Metro. Well, 2 weeks ago, Parliament passed a motion endorsing the expropriation of land without compensation. The EFF tabled the motion in Parliament. The DA opposed the motion. This motion paves the way for a policy that gives government the power to seize land and property rights from individuals and families. Finance Minister Nhlanhla Nene has broken his silence on the controversial value-added tax increase. He says he believes the VAT increase is a step in the right direction. Nene was speaking during a conference of the Federation of Democratic Unions of South Africa in Kameeldrift in Johannesburg yesterday. This was his first public appearance since he was reappointed to the position last month.
Nhlanhla Nene back in the hot seat. He described his return to National Treasury as emotional.
I spoke to the colleagues at the Treasury this morning, and I said to them, I feel like a husband that was kicked out by his wife, left and did many things outside there, and find yourself back at home and with your kids surrounding you, asking you to explain where you're coming from. So I said to them, the long and short of it, I've been on sabbatical.
He gave a nod to the budget delivered by Malusi Gigaba 2 weeks ago.
The 2018 budget that was introduced a few weeks ago has an opportunity to reintroduce and inspire confidence and contribute to a recovery in growth and investment.
Nene is bullish about the economy's growth prospects for this year. He says he expects growth to be better than the 1.5% forecast announced by Gigaba in the budget speech.
At the moment, we'll keep these numbers as penciled in our budget review for this year, but we are likely to revise these numbers upwards come the medium-term budget policy statement, because I would want to believe that with the developments that are afoot, we are likely to make a huge turnaround.
Nene also spoke about the 1% increase in VAT, which is set to kick in next month. He said he has been briefed about the reasons behind the decision and is satisfied with it. Mbogeni Mutwa, SABC News, Pretoria.
A traditional healer, Tokozani Msibi, will be joined by 3 other suspects in the Witbank Magistrates Court for allegedly kidnapping 13-year-old Kabisile Shabani with albinism and her 1-year-old cousin Nkosikona Ngwenya in Fosman in Witbank. Shabani and Ngwenya's bodies were discovered last month in a shallow grave and stream.
The 32-year-old Sangoma will be appearing again at this court. He appeared last week Tuesday, where his lawyer asked for more time to prepare for a formal bail hearing today. And subsequent to that, 2 other males were arrested by police in connection with this murder. So the 3 will be appearing in the dock today. Here we have a heavy police presence here outside court. Police are being bussed in Kumbis. They've got your municipal police officers, and they've got traffic officers. We know that last week violence broke out where the angry community outside court went to the gate where suspects are being transported, and they were chanting freedom slogans outside there, asking the police to hand over the Sangoma to them, the suspect, and saying he cannot go through the justice system as if he has done small crime. They're saying that an eye for an eye. They were baying for his blood, and when police did not budge, they started stoning. Police vehicles were stoned. Some members of the community were injured. Another woman fell and broke her arm, and another man was hit by a stone in his head. They were just uncontrollable and angry, saying that this guy must be handed over to them. So police, law enforcement officers have made precautionary measures right now. Both streets coming into the court have been cordoned off, and only us members of the media are allowed in, and law enforcement agencies.
The Democratic Alliance leader Mmusi Maimane is leading an anti-VAT march to the National Treasury in Tshwane. The DA says VAT increases will hit the pockets of all South Africans, especially the poor and unemployed, as food and transport costs will skyrocket. The DA says instead government should cut wasteful expenditure and could have saved and freed it up to 112 billion rand. Well, SABC's Patricia Visagie is at the march and she joins us now. Very good morning to you, Patricia. Give us an update from your side.
Well, good morning and welcome to the capital city. As you can see, a big march that is underway by the official opposition, the DA, here in Pretoria. And we are at the old Potco depot, where, of course, the march is supposed to start, of course, heading to Treasury, where the members of the party and members of the public will, of course, try and resist the recently VAT increase that was announced by the former Minister of Finance, Malusi Gigaba. So let's speak to John Moody here, who is the party's provincial leader, just to find out, are you happy with the outcome and what can we expect?
Well, I'm happy with the outcome. We expect to have over 3,000 people here today. And of course, we expect that this will continue our fight against this unjust tax. we believe that this is another way that the ANC now wishes to even impoverish the already poor. And we believe that this tax will just unnecessarily add burden upon people who are already suffering. In the past, under Jacob Zuma, there was an open fleecing of the coffers, and this is an attempt to cover up all the damage that was done by him by overtaxing our people once more. And the poorest of the poor are going to be the ones that suffers at the end. And we as Democratic Alliance cannot remain silent on an issue that we believe oppresses our people even more.
But don't you know it's perhaps, or rather, don't you think it is perhaps a little bit too late? Isn't this a decision that has already been concluded?
No, this matter still needs to be debated in the House. It is once it is passed within the House. And remember, nothing is cast in stone. The people have the right, and we, to have this thing reversed and to be reviewed. And as I said, it is now for us to apply the pressure so that when the debate does take place, there is enough public sentiment in support of us championing the fact that this must be reversed. And we can succeed, and I believe that we will succeed.
Some say this is just politicking, point scoring, and gaining political mileage out of the situation. Well, how would you react to that?
Definitely not. I mean, for decades now, VAT hasn't been increased. But the minute you now have a shortfall because of us being downgraded because of an ANC government and us not having access to funding from abroad, and our economy being in the state that it's in, now, of course, it's a matter of raising tax, a general tax, such as VAT, that will have that negative impact upon the already overburdened domestic budget. And add to that the 52 cents fuel levy, which will also add to inflation and our shrinking economy. It just doesn't make sense. What we need to do is we need to look at alternatives, and that is tightening our belts and working wisely with our budgets that we have. We can do so much more with what we have, and therefore prevent an unnecessary additional burden upon our people.
But what do you make of the reaction from the former Minister of Finance, who, after, of course, he delivered the budget speech, repeatedly said, but there was no other alternative?
No, definitely not. We did put alternatives on the table, and we will continue to put those alternatives on the table. We said that there are savings that can be affected by, for example, just cutting the cabinet. I mean, we have a bloated cabinet. We can have 15 ministries. That will save a good couple of billion rand. And every cent will add towards us not having to necessarily raise the VAT by 1%.
Apart from the march today to, of course, put pressure to drop the VAT increase, what other actions is your party planning to take?
Well, we will be taking this matter to the streets. We have a petition going. We will join with other civil society organizations where we will continue to demand that the people's voice be heard, and we will, as I said, champion that voice and that view in Parliament. And if we have enough public sentiment behind us, believe you me, it is supposed to be the government of the people, by the people. Government will have to listen to us, and we will continue to be there.
Mr. Moody, just before we wrap up this interview, in short, what can we expect with your route, and for the rest of the day, how is this going to work?
Well, we're going to march from here to Treasury. It will be a peaceful march, and there we will be delivering our speeches, and we will then be addressing the issues as Musi, the alternatives as Musi will be presenting to the public over there. But I can assure you that from a DA perspective, this will be a peaceful march.
All right, thank you so much, Mr. Moody. There we have it, the DA provincial leader, Mr. John Moody, just unpacking what the march today will entail. Of course, from here, the crowd will be moving to the National Treasury, where they will go and try and put pressure on government to try and see if it is possible to drop the recently announced a disturbing message for many South Africans that we will be faced with a VAT increase. This despite many people in the country already struggling to make ends meet. And as you heard Mr. Moody emphasizing that it's supposed to be a government for the people, by the people. But at this gesture, or rather juncture where we find ourselves as many South Africans, it seems like that is not the reality that many South Africans are faced with. So throughout the day, we'll come back to you and give you updates in terms of how the protest is going. But for now, let's toss it back to studio.
Thank you very much, Patricia Fasahi, giving us an update there on the DA's march that they're leading with regards to that 1% VAT increase. We will cross over throughout the course of the morning. Well, today our question that we're asking you on SABC Newsroom is, how has the listeriosis outbreak actually affected you? You can send us your comments on @SABC Newsroom. We'll have a look at some of those comments and tweets after the break.
Our stories.
How do I begin?
Our lives. When all seems to fail, we will raise our voices a bit louder for our justice.
Oh, I went into absolute shock. My whole body was shaky. I couldn't hold a phone, but there he was. I couldn't believe the nonchalant that they were still in the area 2 weeks later.
And in times when the justice system is not able to help us with our individual battles,
I'm willing to do anything. What are you doing? Nothing. Feeling sorry for yourself? No, it's not an option.
These are our stories on Cutting Edge Channel 404.
Entrepreneurship and taking charge of your own destiny is a mindset, and it's something that should start at a very young age.
I started when I was around about 3 or something, because I have a bunch of paintings in the office. I have a teacher that teaches me and my class how to do business, and he was the one who taught me.
Being an entrepreneur makes you money-wise.
Before everyone spent their money, I would sell the little things I painted, and I'd sell my drawings and stuff like that.
In business, it is important to keep record of all your transactions.
I have a passion and I love making anything, so I chose to make Play-Doh, and I'm passionate about it.
Catch Bupilong every Friday at 17:30.
Welcome back to SABC's Newsroom. Well, today we're asking you, how has the listeriosis outbreak affected you? You can send us your comments at SABC Newsroom. Let's have a look at some of the tweets that have already come through this morning. Nazim says, it has affected me because I'm afraid to eat chicken, polony and Viennas. Tabo says, me and my family are not affording those enterprise products, so we are not affected. To be poor is not a sin. Today is my birthday. Well, very happy birthday to you, Tabo, also. Let's have a look at your poll. SABC Newsroom here. Should the contract between Sassa and CPS be extended by the 6 months? Well, just over 60% of you are saying no. Over 30% of you are saying yes. Michael BM Sitole on Twitter says yes, simply because the post office did mention on many occasions that they are not ready at this point in time to start with the Sassa grants paying out, and I honestly don't know what the big deal is, because Sassa grants were always paid on time by CPS and they were never late nor delayed. Last one coming in here from Miss Maya on Twitter, and in that 6 months they must work harder to get more legal and suitable companies to handle the payouts to prevent drama. Thank you very much for participating in both our question and our poll with regards to listeriosis as well as Sassa, huge topics of the day today. We're also going to be speaking to a doctor in just a bit with regards to listeriosis and in fact how it affects us. But first, let's have a look online what's happening. It's moved to Facebook. On our Facebook page this morning, the repatriation of 8 Zimbabwean children who are being kept at a place of safety in Rustenburg in the northwest are set to take place today as scheduled. And then the country's current debate over land expropriation without compensation, which has now been endorsed by Parliament, is important, not because, as some fear, it will radically change the constitution. Rather, it tells South Africans how, in the economy and other spheres, the country deals with its minority-ruled past by crisis followed by compromise. And finally, Paris Saint-Germain forward Neymar left Belo Horizonte in Brazil on Sunday, the 4th of March, after what was described as a successful operation on his injured foot and ankle. This is according to the Brazilian Football Confederation. You can simply search for SABC Newsroom on Facebook, follow us and interact with us. Let's have a look now at what's making headlines on our front pages in newspapers this morning on the continent. Of course, we'll start off here at home in South Africa. Well, the Star today reports that as anger erupted over the dismal handling of the listeriosis outbreak, it has emerged that a shocking 78 of the 180 deaths from the killer disease were in fact infants. Moving to Nigeria, the Daily Trust says President Muhammadu Buhari has said that the perpetrators of the killings and destruction on the Mambila Plateau and other places would be arrested and prosecuted. And finally, in Burundi, the Business Week reports that the East African community is hosting a regional learning investor forum on the environment and natural resources management at the community headquarters in Arusha, Tanzania. Well, Minister of Health Dr. Adam Motsoaledi has announced that government has narrowed down the sources of the deadly listeriosis outbreak in South Africa. So essentially, how does this affect you and what should you replace your food with? Well, to find out more, we are now joined by Dr. Lucia Annelik from the South African Association of Food Science and Technology. Very good morning to you, Doctor. Thank you very much for joining us.
Good morning.
I think essentially the first concern for many South Africans and possibly moms was, what do we eat? What do we feed our children in their lunch boxes? So what are some of the alternatives to specifically the pork variations?
Well, typically chicken is a very popular food in South Africa as well. And if chicken is cooked thoroughly to the bone, then it is perfectly safe for human consumption. So chicken sandwiches would certainly be a really good replacement for the typical polony meats that have been withdrawn from the shelves.
Okay, and with regards to vegans, we do know that listeria is said to be found in soil. So what sort of alternatives are vegans looking at?
Well, listeria, yes, it's in the environment. It's naturally present in the environment. So one can realistically expect it on crops such as your fruits and your vegetables, that it could be there in very, very low numbers. At low levels, it is not a risk to human health. So normally one would anyway take them home and wash them extremely well, and that's the advice I can give vegans. Wash the products very well before they consume them, especially if they're going to be eaten raw.
And another concern that seems to have come up is disposing of the products. There was an advisory, I believe, yesterday on how consumers should dispose the products. Is that possibly hazardous?
It is definitely, if the consumer does throw it away in the dustbin and it lands on a waste dump. We certainly don't want people who are starving, who would possibly go and pick up that food and eat it. Because when it comes to starvation versus food safety, starvation tends to win, and
Definitely.
People will take that risk, and we do not want that to happen. So yes, one should incinerate it, but at the same time, I wouldn't like people all starting fires in their backyards to incinerate this potentially contaminated food. The best is to pack it into a plastic bag and take it back to the retailer.
Okay, and what are some of the other issues around listeriosis with regards to your food? We obviously all store our food in the same place, whether it's in the cupboard or in the fridge. Is that also a concern with other foods that might have come into contact with your polonies and your hams in the fridge?
Absolutely. It's very important to separate foods in the fridge. So where possible, wrap things in plastic bags, and even better, if you have a closed container, that you can then separate your vegetables from your raw meats, from cooked meats, from processed meats, etc. in the refrigerator. Keeping in mind that Listeria is one of the most interesting organisms in that it can grow at our refrigeration temperatures. Most other organisms that cause food poisoning cannot grow at refrigeration temperatures. So it's also very important for consumers to stick to the use-by dates for perishable foods in particular.
Okay, so you mentioned that it can grow in relatively colder temperatures. One of the questions that, you know, myself and my colleagues have also been asking, usually when you cook food, you would think that you're getting rid of the bacteria, or to some extent the bacteria that is hazardous dies or gets diminished. Is that the case here?
That is definitely the case. As I said, it can possibly be present in low numbers in raw chicken, but that's not a hazard to humans because we cook chicken in South Africa. We don't eat raw chicken.
Yeah.
So when it's cooked, the product is perfectly safe for human consumption.
Is that why then polony is more dangerous, because you usually have it cold?
Correct. It's already regarded as a ready-to-eat food. And that means we don't normally cook it further. But with the Russians and the Viennas and the Frankfurters, those kind of sausage-like products, the best is really to reheat them in a steaming hot pot of water around 70 degrees, and we don't all have thermometers, but if it's steaming hot, then you are actually killing all the organisms that might be present on the surface of those products.
Definitely, and a shocking number coming in there, that out of the 180 deaths that have been recorded, 78 of them are infants. Why are infants and pregnant women so high at risk?
Well, part of it is the immune system that has been weakened. When a woman is pregnant, or when you get older, over the age of 65 or over 60 even, your immune system does tend to weaken a little bit. And so that is typically where Listeria monocytogenes strikes, is the weakened immune system persons. And so unfortunately, if a pregnant woman picks up Listeriosis, she may not show really very bad symptoms. She might come down with some flu-like mild symptoms, and it may pass very quickly. But she transmits the organism via her placenta to the unborn baby, and that is the danger.
Definitely. And with regards to cleaning of fridges, we mentioned earlier that it could possibly contaminate other foods that you stored with. What is the best way that a consumer at home can clear their fridge and know that it's to some extent Listeria free?
Right. It's best to wash the fridge and the racks of the fridge, if you can take them out, in very hot water and detergent, and also thereafter disinfect them with diluted household bleach. It works extremely well.
What are some of the other concerns that I think are being missed possibly with regards to the Listeriosis outbreak?
I think the most important message is to get the message out to consumers to not consume those foods. Avoid them if possible, and where they can, and if they really wish to continue eating them, like not so much the polonies, but the Viennas, etc., because I know that consumers are sometimes cash strapped. Cook them. Heat them very well before you consume them, but avoid the other ones that you cannot cook.
Yeah. Doctor, what do you make of the companies only bringing the information forth now? There was an earlier interview conducted with the CEO of Tiger Brands with Morning Live's Leanne Manus, and there was a report saying that there were traces of Listeria found, very minimal, dating back all the way to the 14th of February. What do you make of companies not necessarily taking this seriously, or leaving it 18 days later for it to be declared a national crisis to come to the fore?
Well, first of all, I cannot comment on the interview held with Tiger Brands because I didn't see it. But certainly on a general level, food processing companies do have food safety management systems in place. And those systems usually include microbiological testing to verify that their systems are actually functional. In this particular case, we actually don't know what went wrong, and that would be up to the company and its internal investigation to find that out.
Do you think as a whole, and being in food and science, that this now calls for stricter and harsher measures when it comes to the standardization of our food?
Well, absolutely. We have a microbiological regulation in South Africa, but it doesn't contain any requirements for testing for Listeria monocytogenes. And that is one of the weaknesses in our regulatory system. And I'm hoping that this incident and serious outbreak that we have faced will promote the development of proper regulations to include testing and specific levels for Listeria monocytogenes, maximum permitted levels in foods.
Definitely. Thank you very much for joining us this morning. Very, very informative. That was Dr. Lucia Anelik from the South African Association of Food Science and Technology, talking to us about alternative food that people can eat that can replace Russians, Vienna's, polony, as well as how to dispose of the possible foods, and also mentioning there that you need to clean your fridge thoroughly in hot water, and again also the utensils that you used to clean your fridge. Let's have a look now at some other news stories making headlines. The good news for motorists who will be paying a few cents less for fuel come midnight tonight. US President Donald Trump says sanctions against Zimbabwe will stay in place despite changes in government. For the latest, we are now joined by SABC's Matlako Komane from the Constitutional Court in Braamfontein with regards to Sassa's extension. It is, of course, a top story this morning. A very good morning to you. Essentially, take us through why Sassa is looking for an extension when they were already given 12 months to put in a new system.
Good morning. Sassa has previously, what Sassa did tell us in regards to the extension that they're seeking was the fact that they had a particular part of the contract which they had not yet facilitated with the South African Postal Services. It's for about 2.5 million grant beneficiaries, and that's in relation with people that actually receive their grants in cash. That is the part of the contract which they are actually asking for an extension from. Sassa will obviously make it known to the court as to why it is that after so long they're still seeking extra extensions.
And why are we at this current situation? Please give us a bit of a background.
Well, we know that Sassa entered into a contract with CPS in 2012, where CPS was then responsible for the distribution of grants to South Africans. But this contract was found to be invalid by the Constitutional Court and set aside. But because now, in a bid to try and avoid a crisis where grants were not going to be able to be paid to South Africans, the court then decided to give Sassa and CPS time, set aside their order of invalidating the contract between the two parties. But they also then asked them to find another contractor, put the contract out for bid, which was a closed bid, which was awarded to the South African Postal Services. And you might also recall that South Africans also receive their grants in different methods, which is the cash, the physical cash that people actually go to the different points especially in rural South Africa, where they get the money, and also electronically as well. And those were the services that CPS was giving to South Africans. Well, this was the contract that Sassa had with CPS. But for now, they're back here in court asking for an extension for the parts that has to do with the cash, the physical cash that people get, those grant recipients that get cash in hand.
And essentially, why has the extension been part of the deal? Why has a deal been made with the post office and it's already been sealed? The cash, like I said, that the post office at the moment is able to give people their money electronically. What Sassa is now asking for an extension on is the cash
payments, the physical cash that people get at the different points. But there is, in effect, a contract between the South African Post Office and Sassa for the distribution of grants. It's just that Sassa said that they are asking, or is saying that they are asking for an extension that there can be a proper handover between the three parties of the cash in hand grant beneficiaries.
Indeed, thank you very much for joining us. That was our reporter on the ground, giving us updates with regards to the Constitutional Court application by CPS to be extended for another 6 months from the Constitutional Court in Bloemfontein. SABC's Matlako Kamane. Let's move on to one of our main stories of today, where a traditional healer, Thokozani Msibi, will be joined by 3 other suspects in Witbank Magistrates Court for allegedly kidnapping 13-year-old Gabisile Shabani with albinism and her 1-year-old cousin Nkosikone Ngwenya in Vosman in Witbank. We now cross live to our reporter Sibongile Mkani Mpolweni, who is in court covering the story for us. Over to you. Hi Sibongile, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
A very good morning.
We are live at the Witbank Magistrates Court, where residents and community members who are here to protest the Sangoma is appearing in court with 2 other men who were arrested in connection with the albinism killing of those 2 children from Vosman. I'm just going to move out of shot so that you see the crowd that is behind me. This crowd has just broken the red line that they were not supposed to cross. Now, this is a new crowd. There is another crowd that is on my left side, which arrived earlier and also wanted to be here. I'm just going to try and walk with you guys just to show you the many people that are here, and as well as the police presence outside court. The case has not been called yet. We're expecting the case to be called soon. But back to this crowd that is behind me, there are banners of Sanko, traditional healers, those that are registered. That lady there in red, they are traditional leaders that we spoke to earlier on today, saying that they are here condemning the acts of this Sangoma, that traditional healers are not killers. They are here in support of the family and those children that have been killed.
General consensus on the ground, specifically from some of the supporters who have come to show their support this morning. Unfortunately, unable to hear Sibongile. They're giving us an update there with regards to that court case linked to the killings of 2 children with albinism. We will be giving you more details throughout the course of the morning on that court case. Well, motorists will breathe a sigh of relief at the fuel pumps when the petrol price goes down midnight tonight. The petrol price will go down by 35 cents a litre, diesel by 46 cents and paraffin by 23 cents a litre. The lower oil price and the stronger rand are the main contributing factors for the decrease. Economists say the decreases could help bring down the inflation rate towards 4%. This could also influence the Reserve Bank's decision to cut interest rates. But the price relief will be short-lived as the fuel price is expected to increase next month because of the 52-cent levies that have been announced in the budget speech last month. Some news abroad. US President Donald Trump says sanctions against Zimbabwe will stay in place despite the changes in government in the country. The decision was announced in a letter to Congress.
President Trump's letter notes the November 2017 change in government after former President Robert Mugabe's resignation, saying it offered an extraordinary opportunity for Zimbabwe to set itself on a new path that could allow for re-engagement with Washington. But like several United States senators who held a hearing on Zimbabwe late last year, the Trump administration remains skeptical.
Zimbabwe has a new president, but the critical questions of whether the new government reflects material change from Mugabe's decades of rule and what path Zimbabwe is likely to take under President Mnangagwa, these are things still left unsettled. He'd been closely allied with President Mugabe since Mugabe's rise to power. He stands accused of orchestrating a string of massacres in the early 1980s to consolidate Mugabe's power. leaving as many as 20,000 people dead in Matabeleland.
Importantly,
a view shared by colleagues across the aisle.
I'm concerned that despite the promises made by President Mnangagwa to rooting out corruption, to having free and fair elections, and to overseeing an inclusive government, there is simply not yet enough proof that this regime will be any different than the one before.
President Trump has called for concrete actions on the political and economic front by President Emmerson Mnangagwa, who will mark 100 days in office on Tuesday.
You don't build Rome within 100 days, but within 100 days, you should be able to set a foundation for a clear strategy of turning around the economy, resuscitating the economy, rebuilding the economy. And regrettably, with Emmerson Mnangagwa, he has failed and failed absolutely to set and put a fingerprint, a footprint in the economy. And part of his problem was that he actually did not have a plan. He actually did not have a strategy.
The United States president says that in response to persisting threats on these fronts, he has determined that it's necessary to continue to maintain the punitive measures. Mnangagwa, some army generals and other top officials are all targeted by measures for alleged human rights abuses and previous election rigging. Shervin Brycepease, SABC News, New York.
Some sporting highlights for you now. Well, South African captain Faf du Plessis says he expects a chirping in any match against Australia, but it needs to be contained to the field. The Aussies bowled out the Proteas for 298 on the morning of day 5 for a 118-run win and a 1-0 lead in the 4-match series. The result was overshadowed by the dressing room altercation between Australia's vice-captain David Warner and South African wicketkeeper batsman Quinton de Kock.
No, Quinton's fine. I don't think you get a reaction out of Quinton anyway most of the time. So when you look at him now, it's like nothing happened. Yeah, I mean, as I said, I wasn't out there in the middle. All I've heard, there was a lot of personal stuff on the field already, to and from. Who started it, I don't know. Yeah, so if it was happening on the field, it probably should have been nipped in the bud on the field already. And the fact that it spilled over off to the field shouldn't happen.
Well, South Africa are on course for their best results at the Cyprus Cup. They take on Belgium for 5th place on Wednesday after ending 2nd in their group. Banyana held a gutsy Korea to a goalless draw in the 3rd and final group stages clash and the Cyprus Women's Cup. The Koreans are ranked 11th in the world compared to South Africa's 54th position on the FIFA Women's World Rankings. South Africa head coach Desiree Ellis made 4 changes to the starting lineup with a little tinker with the team that beat Hungary 1-0 a couple of days ago. The draw was a good showing by Banyana, who have now gone 3 matches unbeaten in the tournament, something they were not able to achieve in their last 5 appearances. This is also the first time they have not conceded any goals. The result means Banyana complete the group stages with 5 points, 2 behind log leaders Korea. The Manja Matic scored a stunning stoppage time winner as Manchester United came from 2 goals down to beat Crystal Palace 3-2. Well, goals from Andros Townsend and Patrick Anholt had Palace in control at Selhurst Park. Chris Smalling started United's comeback on the 55 minutes when he headed in Antonio Valencia's cross. Matic had his goal-bound shot cleared off the line. Romelu Lukaku's 99th career Premier League goal drew a wayside level after Alexis Sanchez's shot had hit the crossbar. Matic then scored the winner from 25 yards to take Man United back above Liverpool into 2nd place.
Hit the post.
Some football news closer to home. SuperSport United, runners-up in the previous CAF Confederation Cup, are a shadow of their former selves and will hope to reignite some form when they get their continental campaign underway later today. Matadzadza take on Petro Atletico of Angola in a last 32 tie. The clubs clash in Luanda with the return match in Pretoria on the 16th of March. Coach Eric Tinkler quit SuperSport on just 4 days ago. Cape Town City are in Maputo in Mozambique for their match. And in the Champions League, Tshwane Giants, Mamelodi Sundowns battled out in Rwanda tomorrow. And Wits beat Pampelmooses 2-1 on aggregates in the prelim stage and now face Angolan outfit Ogosso. Moving on to international sporting, Paris Saint-Germain are hoping their Parc des Princes crowd will help them overturn a 3-1 deficit in the Champions League last 16 return leg against Real Madrid as they tried to cope without the injured Neymar. Well, the talismanic Brazilian forward was ruled out of today's game after undergoing football surgery, or rather foot surgery. But PSG coach Unai Emery is confident that the home fans will play a key role. If they are to knock out the defending champions, PSG will need to be more focused than during the first leg when they conceded 2 goals in the last 10 minutes. Meanwhile, Real Madrid know they face a stiff challenge when they line up against Paris Saint-Germain in the French capital. Madrid coach Zinedine Zidane says his side needs to play good football for all 90 minutes. He added that in any case, one of the two teams will be disappointed in the end. Let's have a look at your fixtures. Well, moving on, the Twitter front winner Bradley Wiggins defended himself against accusation that himself and Team Sky used permitted medication for performance enhancements and said that he was the victim of a malicious smear. The British report said the team had crossed an ethical line by using performance enhancement drugs that are allowed for medical purposes. Wiggins was granted a therapeutic use exemption to take the substance which helps asthma sufferers, and also before the 2012 and 2011 tours, as well as the 2013 Giro d'Italia. Well, that's a wrap up of your sporting highlights, at least for now. Phil Hawkins is standing by with your weather forecast.
Yeah, thank you very much. Let's take a look at that weather forecast for today. Now, showers are forecast in South Africa's eastern regions, concentrated primarily on that southeastern coastline, and scattered showers extending into parts of the Highveld. In those areas, we're expecting mostly afternoon showers, and this is going to result in thunder showers as well. Now, we do have a rainfall band moving through towards those northern parts of Namibia. There, low pressure systems present in the area, drawing in that moisture and then extending through towards parts of Mozambique. The tropical cyclone has moved a little bit further south and now beginning to move away as we progress on into tomorrow from the landmass. It still brings in quite a lot of rainfall both today and tomorrow to parts of Madagascar, as well as the islands of Mauritius and La Réunion. As we take a look at our rainfall for tomorrow, back onto the South African region though, we take a look again at scattered showers and thunder showers in the southeast, with rainfall extending into parts of northern Namibia and surrounds. Now, we do have a weather watch and a weather warning for you for today, issued by the South African Weather Service. If you're in South Africa's northwestern interior, expect a high Veldfire danger weather warning in the area there. Severe thunderstorms, this is a weather watch issued by the South African Weather Service over the eastern parts of the Eastern Cape. Possible lightning as well as thunder. Now, let's take a look at what's going on in a little bit more detail today. Cape Town's at 28 degrees with dry conditions, PE dry as well at 25. Now, from there on in, we tend to see a lot of rainfall through the central and interior regions of South Africa. We continue to see those wet conditions despite some very, very hot temperatures around. Upington's at 38 degrees for today and Pretoria peaks at 31. 31 for Windhoek as well. Windhoek might just get a bit of wet weather for today as well, which of course will be very well welcome there. Gaborone is at 35 degrees Celsius, Harare peaking at 27 with a partly cloudy day, which is most likely to yield rainfall later. Mahajanga 28 degrees, temperatures of 26 in Friandaransoa as well as Antananarivo. Very wet weather forecast for the area as that tropical depression and that tropical cyclone are still beginning to move away. We're still seeing the effects of that in the area. Bit of wet weather around Mombasa, Nairobi and surrounds as well. We're going to see that wet weather continuing despite some hot daytime highs. That means we're also going to see high humidity in most of these areas as well. Very humid day forecast for Bangui at 39 degrees with wet weather coming in. Showers progressing through the day there as well as in Libreville, similar conditions. Kinshasa and Brazzaville just missing out on the rainfall with a dry but partly cloudy day. Now, rainfall still forecast in those far northwestern regions of Africa. Now, moving into the northern hemisphere spring, we're going to start to see more rainfall coming into that southern coastline of West Africa, as you can see for the progression of today and tomorrow. And then, of course, tomorrow again, starting to see that band of rainfall opening up in the east as well, which, of course, is indicative of the change of season as well. We're going to see that becoming more and more common. So, for today, let's take a look what this all means. Addis Ababa, 21 degrees Celsius with wet weather. That wet weather is going to start to open up more and more. We're seeing temperatures warming up in Cairo, 29 degrees Celsius, and Baghdad at 31. So definitely a massive improvement, or at least a massive rise in the temperatures over the last few weeks. That's where we're going to leave your weather for now. Stay with us here on the SABC.
This is the man who only has his album out on digital format. Chance the Rapper has landed 7 Grammy nominations this year. This success is overseas. A few Pretoria students say they're switching to digital platforms that allow them to pay for their music.
I only buy the music that I really want, like house. Full album downloads. I'll always go straight to the place and get the whole album.
Yeah, I'm big on the streaming game right now.
Recently, Apple Music announced that they're now offering student discounts in South Africa. Musicians feel such offers are a good thing.
Of course, we're getting connected, onto online digital stores, and you're finding a lot of online releases actually long before artists release the physical copies of CDs, because they actually want to feed it onto online platforms. Online platforms are encouraged to consider that Africa is a mobile-first continent.
And increasingly also from local platforms that have, customized services to cater to specific African markets, they're also becoming quite popular. But I think the key thing to take out is that, Africa is going the digital route, especially the mobile route.
We're dealing with a younger crowd here with smartphones who do not necessarily need to be inconvenienced by going to that mall to buy the CD. And you need to also understand that this also gives you the independence to buy the exact track that you need off an album.
Smartphones, tablets and other digital platforms are, however, opening up the industry to a lot of piracy, as many download and share the music without paying for it. Back to the group of students in Pretoria.
When it comes to downloading, if I have to download one song at a time, I'll go to pirate sites and I'll download.
Hip-hop, I download, single tracks I download online from piracy.
It's just really easier to go on the pirate sites and download the music.
There are musicians who don't mind sharing for free because of the popularity it creates.
Nasty C decided to release his album Bad Hair for free on audio. It's called Audio Smack, and in a day he received over 187,000 listens and downloads in just one day. And then the following day he released it on iTunes, and this is weeks before he even released the hard copy, and he was already #1. So we are moving towards the digital platform, and it seems like it's now taking over. Although it's at a slow pace, but it's really taking over.
Some musicians don't see piracy as an entirely bad scenario.
The African music industry now is mostly reliant on the popularity of songs and hits. So in my opinion, first of all, the more popular a song is, the more other platforms, paid platforms, are interested in it. So if a song is shared so often, I want it illegally or pirated, it becomes so popular that the paid platforms now want to use it, and the TV stations that pay royalty also want to get it on them, want to be part of it, and also the artist gets more bookings, and which is where artists are now making a lot of money. Because in the past, artists weren't getting big fees, but now the fees are getting really, really big, on par with a lot of the fees, even in the northern music industry. So it is a good thing. There can be improvement in terms of the paid platforms, because there are lots of people that want to pay for music, but just not have the platforms where they can go pay. Not many Africans have Not many Africans have credit cards.
This suggests that while Africans are increasingly spending their money to buy music from digital platforms, piracy might decrease even further if payment methods changed to incorporate those that are used in the continent, like M-Pesa, cell phone banking, and others.
Well, the Constitutional Court is set to rule whether on the controversial CPS contract extension with Sassa.
Those are environmental swabs and not product swabs. So there's no direct link here to the product.
But Tiger Brands remains defiant despite evidence linking its products to the deadly Listeriosis outbreak. A public protector, Bosisi Mkabane, will have her work cut out when she appears before Parliament's Justice Committee today. And South Africa are on course for their best results at the Cyprus Cup. They take on Belgium for the 5th place on Friday after ending 2nd. Welcome to SABC Newsroom. Just gone 10 o'clock this morning. We're coming to you live from Johannesburg. I'm Shante Yankees. Thank you very much for tuning in. A lot coming up between now and 12 p.m, including the latest on the Listeriosis crisis. And we'll also have some sporting headlines coming up just before 10:30. Let's have a look at your top story this morning. The Constitutional Court is expected to rule today on the request from the Social Security Agency to have its controversial contract with Cash Paymaster Services to pay welfare grants to millions of beneficiaries extended by another 6 months. The contract between the current service providers CPS and Sassa will begin in 2012 and it was declared invalid by the Constitutional Court in 2014. In March last year, the court suspended its ruling for the second time until the 31st of this month. Well, this is to allow for the continuation of the payment of grants and to give Sassa time to appoint a new grants distributor. Well, since then, Sassa has partly struck deals with the post office set to take over grant payments. The Tiger Brands CEO Lawrence McDougall says there is no direct link between the outbreak of Listeriosis and their products. McDougall says the Department of Health found a strand of listeria in their environment, but not in their products. He spoke to SABC News earlier today.
From the announcement in December that Listeriosis had been raised by the Department of Communicable Diseases, obviously, you know, we started taking precautions in our factories and started working through all of our units with increased testing protocols and also making sure that the environment was clean for us to operate. We had a visit by the regulators in January in our factory, and they took over 400 swabs through our factory. So we've been working very, very close with them. We took our own swabs after that visit as well. And through the middle of January and February, we obviously worked with them very, very closely. So we've been working very closely with all the regulators through our factory and as things have evolved.
Yeah.
So yes, we have.
Where does the discrepancy come in, where you at this point are saying that you don't get the link from your manufacturing plants to the death of these 181 South Africans?
So where we are at the moment is that the Minister on Sunday informed us that there was a link, that what they found in some of these swabs that they took in our factory, there was evidence of ST6 strain in our factory. And that's a similar strain that they apparently have found in some of the tests that they've done on some consumers. Those are environmental swabs and not product swabs. So there's no direct link here to the product and those people that got ill. Those are not related to deaths at all. So those are people that got sick from that. that was also a basket of products, not only Tiger Brands products. So at this stage...
Are you disputing their findings? I mean,
not at all. No, not at all.
Because it sounds like in a way you are.
No, we're not. So we're working very, very closely with them. We haven't seen the results yet. We've asked the Minister and the Department to share those results with us.
So as today, I mean, these were released. I mean, a big warning SMS came out to the media on Sunday night.
Yes.
I beg your pardon, Saturday night, saying that there would be a press briefing at 12 o'clock on Sunday afternoon. Here we sit on Tuesday morning, and you're saying you still don't have those results from the department.
We don't have. What we have received at 12:35 on Sunday is a notice from the NCC, the National Consumer Council, that they had 3 products that they would like us to withdraw. Frankfurter's bologna and Russian sausages.
Yeah.
Those are the 3 products that they've identified that potentially have strains. What we've done, though, is we've been very, very proactive. Even with that information that we have, we immediately shut down both our Polokwane plant and our Germiston plant, just to make sure that we're protecting the consumer. So we shut the plants down, we stopped deliveries of all products. We've also undertaken a full recall of those products out of the market, just to be prepared. So we're not waiting for the results. We're not waiting for more communications. We met with the NCC yesterday.
Yeah.
They agreed to share those results with us and share more information with us. And we're hopefully going to get those later today.
Yeah.
So we've been very, very proactive to make sure that the product is withdrawn. We had the press briefing yesterday, our meeting with you today,
Indeed.
to make sure that the consumer is very, very aware of what's going on, and that we've been proactive. So, you know, I don't want to...
I'm going to dispute you on the proactive side because, and perhaps you can dispute this finding, but is it not true that on the 14th of February, results already came through showing that there were slight traces in these products with listeriosis? 18 days later, it took the Department of Health to make a major announcement for you to recall these products. Did you already know 18 days ago that there was a trace? Just a trace.
So listeria is found generally in the environment, and I think the Health Minister and many other regulatory bodies and yourselves have put out that knowledge to consumers, that listeria is found in our environment. Through the testing code protocols and the standards that we have, when you test below 100 CFUs per gram, that's effectively seen as non-detectable, and even below 10. So yes, we did find some traces of listeria, but it was very, very low levels and below 10. Historically, that would have not been a concern at all. As we've worked with the health department, we've said that potentially these new strains might be more aggressive, and therefore we wanted to do. So when we met with them in February, we said, listen, this is what is starting to happen. We've increased our protocols, we've increased our testing, we're increasing our standards, we're improving our standards. And if we do find those low levels, whereas we haven't in the past, but we are going to start recalling those products. And where we did on one particular product, we did withdraw it out of the market. But it was at very, very low levels, would have not necessarily been harmful to humans to consume.
Yeah.
Well, Public Protector Busisi Mkobane is expected to appear before the Justice Committee to explain her recent public comments. In a recent interview with SABC's Speaking Frankly, Mkobane took a swipe at some judges claiming they were not objective. This followed a decision by the North Gauteng High Court's decision to set aside her report on the Reserve Bank and ordered her to pay the costs of litigation from her own pocket. The Public Protector's report highlighted procurement irregularities, gross negligence and maladministration related to the controversial project. These are live visuals. These are live visuals as we cross over to that Parliamentary Portfolio Committee.
The findings of the courts with regard to 2 cases, the South African Reserve Bank versus the Public Protector and others, Absa Bank Limited and others versus the Public Protector, and also Parliament itself had to go to court to defend Parliament as well as the portfolio committee had to go to court to challenge the remedial actions issued by the public protector. And as the committee and Parliament, we take the view that the Office of the Public Protector is a very important office, and we do not want to have clouds hanging over that office. And we also don't want aspersions cast on that office. We felt that we should request the public protector to appear before us so that she can speak on her own behalf and on behalf of the office, and not the media and other people to speak on her behalf. So I want to believe that this is not the meeting where we should spend time hearing about the structure of the office, how it works, what her challenges are, and but rather a meeting which should deal with matters that are in the public domain, which may tarnish the image of the office that we all have a responsibility to protect, because it is a very important office in the life of our constitutional democracy. So I hope that we will approach the matter in that manner, and that was the basis for our request for this meeting. Advocate Mkwebane, are we at one on that approach?
Thank you, Chairperson. Yes, we thank you for clarifying the matter. We've prepared according to the agenda which we've received from your office, especially on the part of the resources. Hence, we have the presentation on the financial challenges of the office.
Sure, we understood each other. I also said that there were matters in the public domain arising from a report that you are issuing, and that we wanted to hear from yourself, for instance, that in the execution of your duties, there were officials or politicians who did not cooperate, or to put it otherwise, who obstructed you in the execution of your duties, which in our view would be a very serious matter, because the powers that you exercise are powers entrusted to you by the Constitution of the Republic. And as politicians and as officials, we took the oath to uphold the Constitution. It can't be us as politicians or officials who obstruct you in the execution of your duties. So we would want to know if it is indeed true that some of us or some officials in government did obstruct you in the execution of your duties, and who of us are such people who did that, because that would actually be undermining the Constitution of the Republic, and that cannot be tolerated. So we want you to help us to understand how and to what extent we are failing you as politicians and as officials of the state.
Thank you, Chairperson. I think, I take it we are dealing with the Friede report, where there are some information in that report relating to some of the information which were never provided then. I must indicate that
you are right, and also accusations against you that you suppressed information, and we want you to speak to those matters so that we don't have unnecessary and undue clouds hanging over your head.
Okay. During the investigation of the Friede report, we call it the Friede report, the complaint was lodged in 2013 with the Office of the Public Protector. We all know by a DA member in the Free State. And again, that member, if you can allow me just to give background, Chairperson. In 2013, according to the report, which is public information, the said member complained about the following issues. That the Portfolio Committee of Agriculture in the Free State around 2013, September, heard from the head of the department, Mr. Tabete, that an agreement between the province and the private partners, Estina, was subject to a confidentiality clause. So that's one of the things which raised a red flag to this member. That in terms of this agreement, Estina is partnering with Paras, an Indian company, which will be holding 49% of the shares, talking about the amounts which Estina will be paying, 228 million, and how much will the government be contributing, and that the project planned to milk how many cows. In fact, I'm just telling you what the complaint exactly which we received. And then the next one was we need to investigate the issues of attempt to ensure transparency in the project. So that was one element. The complainant further wrote another letter. Possibly there was nothing which is moving in the office, or the office was busy investigating the matter. But he wrote an additional letter where in 2014 again, where he raised other issues, that it has come to light that Estina will only contribute if necessary, and that they were also benefiting from the supply of goods, therefore, and services from contributions from the provincial government. So there was a concern that the monies which the government will be contributing, 342 million, the Estina was inflating prices. And then they indicated what has been inflated in that complaint letter, and that the Free State government had paid 2.8 million for more for how many cows at that particular period and how much do they cost. I'm just taking you through what the complaint had and what was investigating. That the Department of Agriculture National has already supplied Free State with 40 million worth of equipment, which included tractors and other related issues. That the electronic machine, which is the milking machine, was costing 55,000 per point, which was going to be 30 million. And it also went further to say the goods and services.
And we're just going to break away, coming out from, we're going to be breaking away from the Parliament for just a moment. Let's cross over live to the Constitutional Court, where judgment is being handed down between the Sassa and Cash Paymaster Services dispute.
On behalf of the first respondent.
Thank you, Ms. Kazi.
Chief Justice, members of the court, I appear with my learned friends Ms. Snyman and Ms. Ngwenya for the second respondent.
Thank you, Mr. Bartlander.
Chief Justice, members of the court, I appear with my learned friends Ms. Blizzard and Mr. Lutuli.
Thanks to you too, Mr. Morrison.
May it please you, Chief Justice, I appear on behalf of the South African Post Office together with my colleague, Mr. Badela.
Thank you, Mr. Bava.
May it please the Court, Chief Justice, I appear for freedom under law together with my learned friends Mr. Kutsudis and Mr. Hilita.
Thank you, Mr. Marcus. I forgot to ask earlier, who is going to get involved in the second and the third point? The 700 million and the renegotiation, or the involvement of Treasury? Who's going to get involved on that one? It's you, Mr. Marcus. Who else?
Chief Justice, I want to spend 2 minutes on what constitutes profits.
Okay.
But literally 2 minutes.
Mr. Morrison, obviously. So basically, it's the three of you. Okay, very well. Mr. Kasim?
Chief Justice.
You're protected for 5 minutes. You may proceed.
Yes. Chief Justice, this is judges, learned Chief Justices. This is a limited application in which the applicants seek an extension of the 17 March order in respect of cash payments only. To recap, there are in excess of 10 million, the precise amount being 10,689,816 recipients of social grants. That is set out in volume 12 at 8369. The actual number of beneficiaries as of December 2017 amount to in excess of 17 million. South African citizens above the age of 60 years who comply with the means test of 6,500 rands per month, unmarried and married 13,200 qualify for social grants. As the court knows, it's 1,600, and that goes up on the 1st of April, and finally to 1,700 from the 1st of October. There's also provision for child grants. And when you have an opportunity of looking at the table set out by the panel of experts at volume 8, B293, judges will see that there's substantial provision for veterans and war veterans. The new order from 1st of April 2018, Sassa will make direct payment into the bank accounts of 2.4 million recipients. As the court will appreciate, from Chapter 4 of the second expert's report and further amplified in the third expert's report, the experts consider that the ideal situation is that everybody must have a bank account where electronic payment is made into the bank account. It's a matter which I'll shortly return to. In terms of the agreement entered into on the 8th of December with the South African Post Office, just under 6 million people will migrate into the new system to be administered by the Post Office. That leaves aside 2.8 million people who collect their social grants at pay stations spread out throughout the 9 provinces on scheduled days when people go and collect their cash payments. That system is currently managed by CPS. It involves infrastructural support, which is your logistics to carry the money to the pay stations, the verification exercise, and people are paid. It is that aspect which Sassa was informed on the 8th of December when the Ministerial Committee finalized the negotiations where this contract is being taken over by the Post Office, and it breathes new life into the Post Office, and 5 years later, it will then come back to Sassa. From 8th of December up until the launching of this application, the uncertainty exists over how payments will be made to the 2.8 million people. There's unanimity, there's support from the old minister, the new minister, the three other parties before you today, including the fourth party, SAPO, to not oppose the relief which is sought. If the court requires, I can give the references where all the parties, in fact, agree that it is necessary to give the order. CPS, in fact, qualifies it. It says subject to a reasonable fee, and it's a matter which I'll deal with shortly. Before I go on to the cash payment structure going from the 1st of April, just a word about the contract with the Post Office. What this really involves is changing the old Sassa card into the new Sassa card. It's going to be a process because, as the court will appreciate, CPS has been prevalent for the last 5 years, if not more. The old Sassa card involves a domain of Net1, which is administered by CPS, and what is required is to move on to the new Sassa card, which will have the domain of the Post Office. To return to the observation of the panel of experts, and they said, look, ideally, all the beneficiaries, or recipients rather, must have bank accounts. It would be remiss for me not to point out two aspects of that particular scenario.
As you point them out, your 5 minutes is up.
As the court pleases. 2 points I want to make. First is the cost of administering a bank account, which vacillates currently between 7 rands and 55 rands per account. And the second and more fundamental aspect is this. When the money is deposited into the recipient's bank account, control is lost on how the social grantee can control that money because of debit orders. I now want to move on to the cash payment structure, which is the subject matter of this application. Currently, as I've pointed out, 9 provinces schedule payments when the grantee goes to collect the monies.
Mr. Kasim, should you not be focusing on the problematic areas, though?
Chief Justice?
Why did you wait this long before launching the application for the extension of the contract?
8th of December, my client appreciates that this is going to be a problem area.
Why not earlier?
Because it's only on the 8th of December when the contract is finalized with the Post Office, as the Post Office says, I don't have the infrastructure to actually do cash payments throughout the 9 provinces. We have 5,000 pay points, but that's not going to suffice.
Was that new information? I thought Post Office had indicated the last time we were here what capacities they have, what pay points they had, and quite apart from the information they furnished us with, wasn't it incumbent upon Sassa to make its own investigation as to what is it that Post Office can offer, so that once a view is formed that Post Office is punching way above its head, then Sassa could look into the possibility of approaching this court when there is still time, rather than behaving as if it really wants to leave this court with no option but to extend?
Chief Justice will recall that in November, the Ministerial Committee takes over the negotiation of the contract with SAPO. There were problems with the contract with SAPO. Between Sassa and SAPO, there were imponderables where Sassa's view was that SAPO, South African Post Office, did not have capacity to take over this contract. And then comes the Ministerial Committee at Parliament level, supervisory role, and the Ministerial Committee has, among others, the minister in the presidency at that stage, members of National Treasury, and members of a number of other departmental people. They negotiate the agreement, finalize the agreement on the 8th of December, and on the 8th of December, that particular function is then excluded. So with respect, Sassa appropriately acts from the 8th of December. They start preparing the specs for the new tender. You have your procurement freeze period, middle of December to middle of January. Immediately, the request is issued mid-January. The first closing date is the 2nd of February. That's been extended twice, because on the 28th of January, when you have your compulsory briefing, there are 80 representatives. This is going to be a very sought-after tender, simply because you're administering over 3 billion rands a month. That's the value of this contract. And what happens is, if I may just give you the date, is then extended from the 2nd of February at the request of the people showing interest in the tender to the 28th of February, and finally the closing date is the 12th of March. So with great respect, I would submit that Sassa acted appropriately in the circumstances.
When were the papers filed for the extension?
Sorry?
When were the papers filed for the extension?
The papers were filed, Chief Justice. Give me the date, exact date, please.
Okay, to make it easy, was it in January? Was it in February?
February, I report.
Why not in January?
Early February, 6th of February.
Yeah, why not in January?
You'll recall that the request goes out for the tender in 15th of January. And the closing date is the 2nd of February.
Yes.
With respect, my clients thought that they could get their act together.
I just wanted to find out whether it could not be anticipated that the tender process was going to take longer, and while that process is lingering on, it might be necessary to approach this court when there is still time, so that it's in a position to consider all the available options if there are more than one option open to it.
Chief Justice, I can't argue the proposition, why wasn't it end of January? I can't argue with that, but it's beginning of February. Yes.
But Mr. Kasim, has Sassa not been aware since the 18th of December 2017 that it will require CPS cash payment extension?
In fact, they were aware on the 8th of December when the agreement is concluded. That's correct. So what happens is we're looking at a tender, and I've said, Justice Kampepe, this is a major tender. I mean, everybody's interested in it because it's over 3 billion rands a month. If you take an economic analysis, and if my clients were being very practical, let's just look at it from this point of view. If my clients were very practical and says, look, we're going to abandon cash pay points, as the expert says, you shouldn't have it unless within the 5-kilometer radius.
I'm sorry, Mr. Kasim,
Yeah.
I apologize for interrupting you. I know your time is limited, but my sister is virtually following up on what I was saying, which is this. And she's very specific. She said, when did you get to know that the extension would be required? You say the 8th of December.
I accept that.
Why didn't you immediately launch the application for the extension then?
Because by that time, what they started to concentrate is going out on tender. So they need the input of National Treasury. They're preparing the specs. It's prepared. The tender is ready to go out. You have a freezing period, mid-December, mid-January. And to come back to this issue of this 2.8 million, the experts point out, they said you don't have to have as many cash pay points. You should only have it outside the region of 5 kilometers. But that's a policy consideration. If one takes an economic analysis, the amount it costs you to actually go to the pay points and to return from the pay point is probably...
Mr. Kasim, I apologize again. My point is simple. when you know as early as the 8th of December that you're going to need an extension, why wait until February before approaching this court? Why didn't you immediately, considering what transpired during the previous court case, why don't you immediately approach the court and say, I see danger coming our way. I don't want to look like I want to bind the court to do, to extend, I beg your pardon, CPS contract. Yeah. When there is still time to reflect on options, I'm launching this application. No. Why was that not done as early as done while tenders were going out?
Chief Justice, I make 3 submissions. My clients were concentrating on the tender. The second submission I make is that there was the freezing period. And the third submission I make is they genuinely believe that they could get their act together. But I don't quarrel with the argument that as soon as you seek an indulgence from the court, you go to the court the moment you seek it. I don't quarrel with that proposition. I simply point out that in none of the opposing papers is another solution put forward insofar as that real problem exists. Everybody says, we agree you need this service for another 6 months. But nobody says, had you come earlier, you could have avoided it. You can't because you got procurement processes.
No, but it's not known what we would have said had we been approached while there was still time as the court. It's one thing to focus on what your colleagues are saying. It's another to appreciate the need for the court to put questions that could point to another possible solution.
No, Chief Justice, I accept the principle.
Such as the possibility of capacitating post office by pouring resources into it so that it's able to do what is sought to be done by other entities. I'm just thinking aloud. I'm not saying we must address that one. I'm saying it may well be that the court could have put questions that could have led to a realization that the extension of the CPS contract is not necessarily the only solution.
Yeah, Chief Justice will appreciate that the post office challenge, which is really our challenge at this stage from 1st of April, is to convert the old cards to the new cards, bearing in mind the Easy Pay card, which has been already disseminated by CPS. It's there in the marketplace, it's convenient, but I don't argue with the principle that as soon as we require an indulgence, we should come to court.
Well, Mr. Kasim, I am interested in regard to the earlier period.
Sorry, Justice.
I'm interested in regard to the earlier period as to why Sassa only got to know in December that SAPO can't deal with this part of the matter. If I remember well, when this matter was before us last time, and it may even be the time before that, SAPO was saying they had the capacity to render the service that is required. Now, SAPO is a state entity. Sassa is a state entity. I don't understand why, soon after the matter was here before us, Sassa could not have said to SAPO, in order to be able to do this job, this is what you will need to have. Do you have it? And if they say yes, and they say, satisfy us that you have got it. Was that done? Was that not done? Why does it take so many months from the last time the matter was before court, before they know that there is something that SAPO can't do?
And to give a comprehensive answer, also to jointly approach Treasury or government and say, SAPO will need so much money. These are the capacities that would be required for it to be able to execute this mandate. While there is still time, government, please capacitate SAPO, make the resources available so that what it is not able to do as a result of lack of capacity or lack of resources, you can make possible by providing those capacities and resources.
Justice Mokheng, I have some insight into what happened in the negotiations, but let me just say this to you. Firstly, those negotiations was done at ministerial level. And everybody who matters was on that committee. You'll recall that features in the papers. The second is that, of course, there was a solution. There was a solution to buy over the trucks with the software that takes the money to the points. But the question was it possible for SAPA to do so? It was. Was it feasible? It wasn't, because of price considerations. You had to buy the infrastructure and the software from CPS, and there was no agreement on that. I don't want to take it further than that, but there was no agreement on that. So that left you in a position on the 8th of December when a decision is taken on economic principles. Look, we rather exclude this portion of the contract, otherwise it makes no economic sense, because you're also looking after the money that belongs to the taxpayer. So that then resulted in the 8th of December to say, we will excise this portion of 2.8 million. And of course, from an economic analysis point of view, if Justice Posner now from the United States would be asked the question, he'll say, but it's an easy answer. All you do is you force the recipients to open banking accounts. But that's not the policy that this particular client of this particular organ of state took. They took a policy to facilitate the payment, and they said, which now necessitates us to go out to tender and to bring in somebody who can do this particular service at a reasonable cost. But to achieve that, because you've got to follow procurement process, we then required an extension, and hence we 1st of February in court. That we should have come earlier, I have no doubt, because once you want an indulgence, put your papers into court. I accept that principle. But I'm simply saying that the solution lied in the negotiation process, and it's not to say that this is an imponderable of an achievement, but it was not feasible on economic principles.
Well, I'm not sure that what you have said answers my question. Did Sassa ask at the earliest opportunity after the matter was before us, did it ask SAPO whether SAPO could do the whole job? Did it satisfy itself? Did SAPO say, yes, we can do it? And did Sassa satisfy itself that SAPO could do it? I mean, I think the matter was here early in the year last year, early in the year. And from the papers and from what you are telling us, it seems they discovered in December. I can't understand why it took so many months before they discovered that SAPO could not do this part of the job. So my question is, did they ask them early enough, do you have the capacity to do this job? Did SAPO say, yes, we do? And then later on it transpired they actually couldn't do it? Or did they not ask? Or did they not satisfy themselves?
Justice Zondo, it was always in the contemplation of the parties that this function will be performed by SAPO. It became impractical to do so because of financial considerations.
But
it's not
does that answer say they were asked and they confirmed?
Absolutely.
And
absolutely.
They confirmed.
It's not that it was beyond the scope of SAPO to do it. It's within their scope, it's within their capacity. It's not a difficult task. It's going out to tender. I've already told you there were 80 people who in the compulsory briefing who wants to tender for this project. But it's a question of, at that particular point in time, acquiring the software of CPS or of Net1. And that became impractical from a cost consideration, and hence the decision on the 8th of December by the Ministerial Committee, Justice Radebe, in fact, signed the agreement by them to say this particular portion will excise from the agreement. And from there, it became Sassa's problem. So it comes back from the Ministerial Committee, comes back to Sassa, and Sassa must now deal with it as the agent.
You see, Mr. Kasim, if one reads the papers here, and in particular I'm referring to the founding affidavit deposed to by Ms. Bengu on behalf of Sassa, one sees what appears to be a pattern where if you look at what steps are taken either by Sassa or the department to deal with issues that need to be dealt with, they seem to be taking their own time. They seem not to deal with matters with the urgency that the matters deserve. I mean, even if you look at its founding affidavit, you look at what steps have been taken and when to deal with issues, you see that there are gaps of 2 months, 3 months, when it appears nothing was happening. You don't get the sense that either Sassa or the department deals with issues properly. And that links up with the point that the Chief Justice was putting to you. You discover in December, early in December, that there is a need for an extension. But nothing happens until February. And in the end, some application is brought here. We don't normally, then we have to try and find time for it within our role. But when you look at it, there was time for things to be done early and to be done properly. But there seems to be an attitude that doesn't seem to care about dealing with issues urgently, that are urgent, and explaining things properly to the court. Yes. It's as if the attitude is the court has no choice, but it will give us what we want. So we don't have to give them a full explanation about what we have done about this. And that attitude is cause for concern.
Justice Zondo, I can assure you the SAPA people, the acting COO is in court. All the senior people are here, and they will obviously take into account.
And it's not a sentiment that is being expressed for the first time by me. It's a sentiment that other members of this court have previously expressed with regard to how either Sassa or the department or both are dealing with issues. I mean, I think the previous extension application that was brought before us also was brought very, very late. So it's cause for serious concern.
A side issue that I need to have cleared in my mind, I concede upfront that it's not central to the determination of the issue, but it's of some importance. So in a nutshell, it would be cheaper for a private company to acquire what the trucks and whatever that are too expensive for post office, a government entity to acquire in order to render the same service.
Yes, it's the infrastructure together with the software package, because you recall the verification, which is a software package.
Even in the long term?
In the long term, yes.
Okay.
Can I make just 2 more submissions? And that is in terms of the SAPO contract, the payment which Sassa will make. Sassa made a payment of 16.44 per transaction to CPS. In terms of the post office contract, it now makes a payment of 6.71 per transaction. There's a saving of 973, so there's a 58 million rand saving per month going forward in terms of the responsibility which SAPO has now taken over.
Even that won't help SAPO to acquire the infrastructure and the equipment it needs in order to render the service that is to be rendered by outsiders.
You can accept it that the amount that would have required to obtain the logistics and the software package was, for want of a better term, exorbitant in relation to the saving. But why I'm pointing out the saving of 58
Mr. Kasim, could I ask you what happens if the court does not grant the extension?
Justice Foreman, sorry, you've got to repeat that.
What happens if the court doesn't grant your application, doesn't grant the extension?
Then we have a situation from 1st of April where some 2.8 million people will be in a position where they go to their scheduled day because payment is made in the first 12 days of a month. So take a place like Kokstad. It's made in a certain area on Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. People will go there and there won't be monies available.
So you come to us basically giving this court no choice and saying that if the court doesn't make this order, the social grant beneficiaries will suffer. Is that what you're doing?
There will be chaos. They will suffer. Unless, of course, if they get their act together and they open a bank account, then that solves the problem.
But this is a result of the policy decision on your own version not to take other steps.
Yes, yes. I mean, it was a policy decision to excise that particular segment of the services.
So if your policy decision has that effect, isn't the responsibility on your client to ensure, to take other steps to ensure that that debacle that you've put before us does not happen? Don't you have alternative plans?
As things stand at the moment, they don't have an alternative plan. But of course, it lies, the reality is, it doesn't mean to say that the recipient of the benefit is without recourse. It doesn't follow that.
The point is, Mr. Kasim, whose responsibility is it to ensure that the beneficiary receive payments of their grants?
There's no question it's Sassa's responsibility. That's in terms of the law. Can I just make one further point insofar as the other two issues are concerned? Chief Justice, if you want to hear me, the 700 odd There's just two other issues I just briefly want to make submissions. There's some 700 odd profit. You'll recall the debate between the experts whether transfer pricing and tax implications, but ultimately on CPS's version there's a profit just over 700 million. I would submit that it would be a quantum leap in this application if the court was to say that money must go to Sassa. Although Sassa wants the money, I would submit that that particular application is not ripe for hearing. We don't appreciate the course of action. And the other aspect is, insofar as the pricing is concerned, we would submit that CPS is now performing 1/3 of the function. It is the more expensive function because it doesn't rely necessarily on income streams. It actually relies on actual work. And we would submit that that price must be fixed by National Treasury, bearing in mind that we're no longer paying them 16.44 per transaction.
I thought you would avoid arguments that are supposed to be raised by CPS itself.
Yes, but I just want to make those points. I mean, because I made those in my submissions, I've got to explain why we thought fair and reasonable fee. I understand Mr. Marcus is saying that they should not. It's because we're no more paying them that 16.44. So we're saying the services they rendered. It's our responsibility to see they actually rendered the services. It would be foolish for us to expect somebody to take on this particular task under an order of court and not render it properly. We wanted the services to render properly, and they must be compensated for it.
I was just saying it on a lighter note that you wouldn't want to be misunderstood as fighting for CPS.
No, I'm not fighting for CPS, but I must do... If I'm not paying the 16.44 per transaction, which gives me a 58 million rand saving, they're no longer doing a 100% function. They're doing, give or take, a 28% function, perhaps a bit less. For that, there must be compensation. The question is, what must they be compensated? We submit, let National Treasury sort that out. That's our submission, consistent with the order. It's in my interest to see that these services are properly rendered for the next 6 months. Those are our submissions.
Mr. Kasim, do you accept then that Sassa failed in its duty to the court?
We've explained the circumstances under
no,
which
I
there was a
understand,
delay.
but my colleagues have put certain questions to you.
Yes.
You've accepted that you could have done it a bit earlier.
Yes.
And given the history of this matter, and I want to put it to you in fairness, because we have to deal with this in a possible judgment. Have you failed in your duty to the court or not?
Justice Kusalia, we're obviously working under trying circumstances. There's 12 billion rand available on a monthly basis. we have all the different forces working against us, because it's not an easy matter. As we go out on tender, CPS has the march against anybody else who's going to tender, because they've been rendering the services for the last 5 years. These are the realities of what Sassa is faced with at the moment. Now, to say what I can make this submission to you is, and I accept that we could have come earlier, but you bear in mind that there was this interposition, there was this ministerial committee that comes from Parliament that's interposed in the work of Sassa. So Sassa takes a step back. And if all things went right, if the SAPO agreement included this particular feature, then you transferred a substantial responsibility to SAPO, which would have encompassed all the activities, another organ of state, which would have bred new life into SAPO, and I would then have submitted we wouldn't have found ourselves in this particular position, but it was impracticalities that arose in the negotiation process which resulted in this particular hearing today. And to say, has Sassa failed in his duties? I would make the submission that they've acted to the best of their ability, accepted that they came a week or two late to court in carrying out their obligations.
Mr. Kassim,
Yes.
if I heard you correctly, you said that Sassa was facing various difficulties, and all the different forces were working against us. Can you clarify that statement, please? What do you mean?
On a practical level, if you just focus on this particular tender we're going out now, it's not that it's going to be smooth sailing, because there's 3 billion rand available. So you have the lobbying group for the banks who want utilization of the banks for this particular transaction. You have Sassa's responsibility to ensure that the entire grant is paid to the ultimate beneficiary, save for...
Sorry to interrupt you. What forces are you referring to that's working against Sassa?
That might have been a wrong word to use, but I'm simply saying there are challenges. There are challenges because when you're administering 12 billion funds on a monthly basis, dealing with the poorest of the poor, you have immense problems because you're trying to protect that money in terms of regulations. 10%, up to 10% can be spent on the funeral policy, not more. Any system you devise, you've got to avoid debit orders. You've got to avoid that amount being reduced by all forms of expenses before the money reaches the hands of the individual person. So I'm simply saying
isn't that the point exactly? That there are millions of vulnerable people who depend on social grants,
Yes.
and that Sassa should have acted more diligently.
Can't argue with that proposition.
Mr. Kassim, as you sit down, I want to make a comment. It seems Sassa continues to fail to get its affairs in order.
I'm sorry, Justice Kampebe?
I'm saying, before you sit down, I would want to make a comment. It seems that Sassa failed to get its affairs in order. It is a cause for concern that Sassa comes to this court almost like to blackmail this court that if it is not given an extension, then more than 2 million grant beneficiaries will suffer. You have no alternative that you can submit, you will resort to if this court should refuse to grant you an extension. Would that be a fair comment to make?
The facts are put before the court. And we come to the court for an indulgence because the matter is regulated in terms of an order of court. But this is the reality where Sassa finds itself. And as Mr. Justice Forneman said to me, look, if we don't give the order, it's your responsibility, and that is correct. But I said this, and I make the statement guardedly, and I thought it through. It doesn't mean it's the end of the world for the recipients, because it's a three-way arrangement at the moment. There's an arrangement between the administrator, the donor, and the recipient. It's a question of what responsibility one wants to place on the recipient. And in Chapter 4 of the second Auditor General and a panel of experts reports, there's a very useful analysis why more stern steps, if not aggressive steps, must be taken to migrate this 2.8 million people to a structure that's regulated in terms of electronic financing. So when you say to me, Chief Justice, you say to me, is this not putting the court in an awkward position? It is, of course, because the court wants to ensure that this particular agency has a smooth sailing. But I'm saying we had to come to court. If we didn't come to court, we would be criticized. If we come to court, we're putting the burden onto the court. I understand that. But in the end, the challenge is really we're working in the right direction, we're getting our act together, and there's going to be teething problems. Make no mistake, the migration of 6 people from one card to another card is going to be enormous problems because we can't, nobody here can understand what the mind of the old card holder, the state of mind of the old card holder holding that card. I can't force people to come and exchange it. And if they come, it's a 10 minutes process. But what do? I've advertised, I've told people, but short of not paying them, which is probably the greatest incentive when they'll come and change their card, but short of not doing that, I'm really in the hands of unpredictability. That I can take steps to bring them to the party, of course, education, send my people out, but ultimately, I can't bring a recipient or a beneficiary by force and say, come and change your card.
You know,
that in itself is going to be a problem.
What my sister and all of us are shocked by is this.
Yes.
About 2014, all pay was decided, saying this is an unlawful contract.
Yes.
Up until now, I think it's a full presidential term of an American president. Nothing has been achieved. The court is still being approached after so many years of saying this is unlawful. And unlawfulness continues to be perpetuated while we are watching. It's very sad. For anybody charged with this sensitive and enormous responsibility, it's like we are being laughed at by Sassa and CPS. It's most unfortunate. And what is even said is that there is no explanation. You know, when somebody has done wrong and they have an explanation to provide that we can all relate to, it makes a lot of difference. No explanation that we can understand has been put before us. It's sad. I just wanted to make that point. I don't think my sister was asking for a comment. I'm not asking for a comment.
No, I understand.
We're just expressing our frustration to your client. Most unfortunate. You assume a responsibility or you reject it on the basis that you don't have what it takes to discharge it. Simple. Anyway, thank you, Mr. Kasim.
Thank you, Chief Justice.
Mr. Kasim, just one thing to clarify.
Yes, Justice.
Is there any particular reason why the relief sought by Sassa was limited to the cash payment extension and not including the phasing in and phasing out that you have made submissions on now?
Sorry, Chief Justice, I understand it. Why is the application limited to that?
The reason that we were given by Sassa for the extension was that SAPO does not have capacity to pay or effect cash payments. Sassa did not tell us that it would require extension as well for the phasing in and phasing out portion of the program.
Just coming out there of the Constitutional Court, final arguments being brought forward with regards to Sassa and the CPS extension.
SAPO's responsibility. We have
Headlining Sassa's final bid to convince the Constitutional Court to extend the controversial CPS contract is currently underway. Also, Public Protector Busisi Mkobane will have her work cut out for her as she is currently appearing before the Parliament's Justice Committee.
Those are environmental swabs and not product swabs. So there's no direct link here to the product.
Tiger Brands remains defiant despite evidence linking its products to the deadly Listeriosis outbreak. Well, indeed, it is the top story at this hour. Let's go back to the Constitutional Court, where final judgment is being brought forward to the Constitutional Court between that application extension from Sassa and CPS. Let's cross live.
When it administers it, there's only one deduction permissible, which is your Regulation 28, which is your funeral policy up to 10%. No other deductions. So that's really the differentiating point between the SAPA contract, with the SAPO using its bankers, then money paid directly into other bank accounts. But that is SAPO's responsibility from the 1st of April. But on a practical level, your phasing in, your phasing out will not deter SAPO from carrying on its responsibility, provided the recipient changes the card. That's the only point I made. I said there is going to be teething problems.
Thank you, Mr. Kasim.
Thank you, Chief Justice.
Mr. Badlander, are you first, or is it Mr. Marcus first, or does it not matter?
Chief Justice, I'm older than him, and I'm higher on the list. He admits the first.
Very well.
Chief Justice, members of the court, today we find ourselves here again for the second time in 12 months in an urgent application. It's an urgent application which arises from the failure of the Minister and the failure of Sassa to carry out their constitutional duties. It's another last-ditch attempt to avoid a disaster. It is with respect, shamefully late, and yet again, for the second time, puts the court in a position where it is faced with a fait accompli. I need to say something about the role of the court in this thankfully unusual situation. These, I submit, are not ordinary adversarial proceedings. They are closely linked to, and in fact part of, the court's exercise of its supervisory jurisdiction when it saw the difficulty. It is part of the court's attempt to ensure that 17 million vulnerable beneficiaries are not harmed as a result of incompetence and negligence on the part of those who owe them a constitutional duty, in the first instance the Minister and the Sassa. And so the court has already necessarily undertaken a more active role in exercising its supervisory jurisdiction than it would do in cases which come before it. It has appointed an expert panel to investigate and make recommendations. That has been the one ray of light in the sorry saga. And I pause to note, in relation to what my learned friend just said about how Sassa has not dragged its feet. The panel itself says that Sassa has not produced information when requested, has not attended meetings when requested, has dragged its feet, and has obstructed the process of the panel, let alone the process of this court. The core goal of the exercise, I submit, is to ensure that the constitutional and statutory right of the beneficiaries to social assistance, the constitutional right under Section 27, the statutory right under the Social Assistance Act, that it is fulfilled in full measure. That requires protection of the beneficiaries, and that is the part which is the concern of the Black Sash. I want to turn immediately to what is the main risk of harm, the core risk of harm to the beneficiaries, for which we submit protection is needed. And it all arises from these dual contracts, the contract with Grindrod Bank for what is called a Sassa branded card, and the contract with CPS for what is called the EPE account. CPS says that these accounts are just bank accounts like other bank accounts. They can be operated just like other bank accounts. It's simply a matter of a contract between a bank and its customer, and no one should interfere with that. That's what's being argued in the matter which is currently pending before the Supreme Court of Appeal, the Net1 case. It's not just an ordinary contract. One needs to look at how the cards and the contracts actually work in practice. We know that contracts are supposed to be consensual, that's the essence of a contract. So how do the cards work? What happens is that when you register for a social grant, you provide CPS on behalf of Sassa with all of your relevant personal information. That is loaded on a Sassa branded card with Grindrod Bank. It's an account held at Grindrod Bank, and it bears the Sassa imprint. It enables you to get access to your money when it's paid into that account at ATMs, through point of sale devices, and at certain merchants. But then there's a second card. The second card is the EPE card. It is a product of Moneyline, and Moneyline is one of the other subsidiaries of Net1. CPS is a subsidiary of Net1. Moneyline is a subsidiary of Net1. They're sister or brother companies. And the way the second, when you register, when you get the second card, your personal information is transferred from your Sassa card to your EPE card by the simple device of putting your finger on a sensor. And all of the information then shifts across. But the result is that the members of the Net1 group have access to your personal information because they have access to the key which operates the EZE, the EPE account. That is explained by Ms. Mart, Volume 3, page A224, paragraphs 25 and 26, and has not been placed in dispute by CPS. Now, CPS says all of this is contractual. This is just another bank account. CPS says that the grant beneficiaries consent to the terms of these contracts, the Grindrod contract and the EPE contract. The Black Sashes attorneys wrote to CPS and asked for information on the means through which beneficiaries are informed of the terms and conditions of these two accounts, which they sign on to by putting their finger on a sensor. And the answer you will find in Volume 3, page A241. That's paragraph 3 at page A241. A243, I beg your pardon, is the answer, paragraph 4. And this is what it says. This is now CPS lawyers answering how people are informed. The terms and conditions are currently only available in English and displayed at all enrollment stations. So you see them by seeing them on the wall in English. Continue quote, as part of the process, the beneficiary is prompted to place his or her finger on a scanner to biometrically verify that he or she has received, read, understands, and accepts the terms and conditions. The words, quote, I biometrically verify that I have received, read, understood, and accept the terms and conditions, close quote, appears on the screen. The process cannot continue until the beneficiary acknowledges same biometrically.
And of course, just coming out there of the Constitutional Court hearing between Sassa and the CPS extension, we now cross back live to Parliament, where the Parliamentary Justices Committee is hearing from Public Protector Busisiwe Mkobane.
Go investigate public's money. And the issue of conflict of interest of the Premier himself, through the media, confirmed that his son has a business relationship with Guptas. So And here we had the company which was dealing there, the Guptas. We heard about the payment of wedding, of Gupta weddings and everything. So it's a matter of concern for us, Public Protector, that in your remedial actions, the Premier must be included, that what step must be taken against him. Thank you.
Honorable Kwame.
Thank you, Chair. Greetings to you, honorable members, and the leadership from the Public Protector's Office and the Public Protector. As you know, Chairperson, if you are a last person to ask questions, you always run short of the questions because colleagues would have taken everything. But I've just have just few to ask. Public Protector, you said the report was completed in 2015 and then was ready to be released. I just want to know whether when you took over office, did you discuss this report with your predecessor, Advocate Madonsela, during the process of handover? I'm of the view that there was that process. Did you touch on this report? Maybe did she brief you as to why some of the things were not covered, especially the issues of the colleagues have been referring to, of interviewing beneficiaries? Because, Chairperson, that one, it's something that I share with my colleagues. Whatever we do as the government, we are doing it for our people there to benefit. Now, if something that concerns them like this, but they are not involved or their story is not being listened to, it's not okay. It's not a good thing that we should do as the government. I also urge the Public Protector that going forward, ordinary citizens of this country must be the priority. I remember, Chair, she promised us that during the interview that she was really going there to work for ordinary citizens. Now we are discovering things like this where they are excluded in such important issues. I urge the Public Protector that going forward, please prioritize our people, especially on issues of thorny issues like these ones. Number two, in your knowledge, have the Premier of Free State instituted the DC against implicated officials as per the remedial actions that you provided? And also, it's true that what my colleagues are saying, that the Premier is alleged to be involved, and it was all over in the media. I just want to know whether have you considered also writing to the President as the boss of the Premier for an advice as to what should happen to the Premier. Because if he's gonna discipline the officials that are reporting under him, definitely his boss as well must do something if there is conclusive evidence that he is implicated. But lastly, Chairperson, the issue of the Gupta leaks, it appears, Public Protector, that it needs a separate new investigation. Now, I will also ask the same question that Honorable Bongo asked, that in light of these allegations, is the office prepared to reopen the investigation on the matter? Because it has been all over the public domain. But also still there on issues of Gupta leaks. I just want to know that in your office, do you have any formal complaint, apart from the media, lodged against them in relation to this project? And if yes, how far is that that matter? If not, then will you consider reopening the investigation on this matter? Thank you, Chairperson.
Honorable Buthelezi, you didn't raise your hand. Thank you very much. Kwabane?
Thank you, Chairperson. Thank you, honorable members, for your questions. Chairperson, I would like to, again, before responding to the questions, remind the House and the Chairperson about the sub judice rule. But I would want so much to cooperate and work with the committee. And I wouldn't want this process to interfere with the functioning of the courts in violation of Section 165(3) of the Constitution, because this matter will be adjudicated in court. And I've indicated to the House that we will avail all the records in terms of Rule 53. And again, that the aggrieved parties have taken the matter to court because of the issues which have an impact on this particular matter. And again, I have experienced a situation where some of the information which you mentioned on matters which are before court, even possibly issues which are in the media, sometimes they find themselves in the court proceedings, where sometimes you mentioned an issue in a certain context, and that matter also is brought there, and you don't have an opportunity to clarify that particular aspect. So I just wanted to just have an opening that some of the issues I wouldn't be dwelling much on because this process is before court. And responding to Honorable Breitenbach, I think you are quite aware, Advocate, that the Public Protector doesn't have jurisdiction over any criminal matter. Issues relating to, because you've referred to money laundering, theft, and which were not investigated, and those issues are criminal matters which are being investigated by the Hawks. Indeed, that was never investigated. And again, to confirm that the matter was finalized, the investigation, according to the information from the investigators in my office. The investigation was completed in 2014, and already by 2015 at the think tank, it's an internal structure discussing all the reports where there would be a publishing of the said reports. And the decision was taken that the report is ready. And what happened is that the only time the Free State Office had to be engaged about this report, it was in 2017 when I visited, in fact, 2016 when I visited Free State, and the matter was raised that this report should be issued. So that addresses the issues relating to the investigation. On the issue of why I didn't increase the scope, the investigation, all the investigation, when I joined the Public Protector Office, a lot of them are like this one, which were at an advanced stage, and the report has been drafted. Already the issues, because when we receive a complaint, We assess the complaint, we determine the issues on what happened, what should have happened, and the difference from what happened and what should have happened, and the prescripts applicable to this. This matter purely focused on the issues of maladministration and the issue of the way the resources or the agreement was entered into, the way the project was managed, and the way the Free State Department managed this project. It was more of the investigation focused a lot on the violations of the PFMA. And again, I agree with you, Advocate Breitenbach, that a lot of the information which, in fact, the report of the National Treasury was, yes, incorporated in this, because indeed the HOD and the relevant officials violated the prescripts as far as this matter is concerned. On why not increasing the scope, a lot of the reports the Public Protector we draft, there is an element of the prejudice suffered by the complainants. And in this particular instance, the investigation never concentrated much on the beneficiaries. It concentrated more on the gist of the complaint, how the agreement was entered into, the issue of inflation of the prices, and the issue relating to the monies which were spent and there was no product which was produced. And I indeed agree that the issue of the Gupta leaks, and which I've mentioned, again, the investigation, the way we conduct it, we don't just write or take information from the media and include that information in the report. Again, we're going to be facing a challenge where we are accused, because any other person will also be having a challenge that you cannot use any information just because it's mentioned in the media and use that as the evidence. Because when you have to use that information, you'll have to go and investigate yourself as the Public Protector and satisfy yourself that this is the information which I have on record and is the information which, even if taken to court, I'll be able to defend, unlike taking an information which you hear from the media. Indeed, the Gupta leaks were received by the office from outer, and I shared the information with the Free State office to say this is the information, but we cannot rely on this information. We will have to do our own investigation. But then when we discussed, again, it was an issue that already the report was focusing on a totally different or different issues. And I indicated earlier, Honorable Kwabe, that the Gupta leaks, in fact, there's no complaint which is received by the Public Protector specifically relating to the Friede matter and the Sun City wedding. The issues which were lodged by CASAC to the office, especially relating to the Gupta leaks, they are part of the investigation, mostly relating to, is there in the statement where I was clarifying the issue of the terms of reference, where some of the issues which are indicated in the Gupta leaks are some of the issues which I was saying, if they can also be included in the state of capture terms of reference. But then this one is not part of that, and there was no direct complaint about the Gupta leaks in 2017. Hence, I've indicated this report was investigated 2013-14. Already the investigation was complete, and then it was ready for issuance in 2015. And The Nkandla judgment, Honorable Swart, I agree with you. Indeed, that's our focus as an institution, that everything we do, we need to make sure that whoever is impacted by the decision of our investigation or of the maladministration needs to be given redress. The beneficiaries, the way the office investigated, it was only getting their details, because in the original complaint was referring to the issue of what the beneficiaries should be, there should be transparency as far as how this project should be managed. Indeed, I think dealing with Honorable Horn's question, also why some of the complainants were not interviewed. It was only like since 2013-14, only getting their details, their IDs to see is there beneficiaries or is just allegations. So that information was acquired from the Department of Agriculture. And in fact, by that time, there were only 78 beneficiaries whose details were received, all of them. But then those beneficiaries were never interviewed. Hence, I'm saying when meeting with the Honorable Maimane, that was the time when I wanted us to get the details of the beneficiaries, which were not forthcoming, but at the end of the day, the key focus of the investigation was that. Again, if expanding a scope just at the report writing stage, again, that's one of the issues which one was accused of doing in the Murphy judgment on CX, that how can we include issues of relating to the prejudice which is suffered by South Africans in that particular aspect, but we're still going to deal with that matter. Therefore, you cannot just include information which you didn't investigate in the drafting of the report. And I agree that indeed the beneficiaries were impacted in this matter, but the investigation never focused on the beneficiaries. The investigators focused on the violation of prescripts by especially the accounting officer and stuff like that. The conflict of interest of the Premier.
It is not permissible to raise banners in the Committee of Parliament. If that continues, the holders of the banners will disqualify themselves from being present in the meeting. This is a committee of the Parliament of the Republic of South Africa, is an organ of Parliament elected by the people of South Africa. We all have to respect the people of South Africa who elected this parliament. So can we all lower the posters or leave the hall?
Chair, I suggest we should possibly adjourn the meeting for a few minutes.
The meeting will stand adjourned. We will not leave the room, but we can't continue the meeting when there is defiance of the committee and the Parliament of the Republic. I hate to say that unless those who are raising the banners lower them. They will have to be removed by people that are entitled to maintain order in the proceedings of Parliament. I hate to have to say that, and I would request that you voluntarily lower the banners or leave the House to avoid unnecessary will we ask those that are responsible for the maintenance of order in the proceedings of the committee to ensure that nothing happens in this meeting which should not happen? Can you move in and ensure that
Indeed, well, we cross back now to Parliament of South Africa. Just a couple moments ago, we saw what seemed to be a very peaceful protest being staged inside Parliament, what looked like BLF members. We will be giving you more updates on that. Of course, Busisiwe Bukabane, Public Protector, is making her inquiry in front of the Parliament's Justices Committee this morning. Let's cross back live to Parliament of South Africa. Just a couple of moments ago, we missed what seems to be a small protest. We actually had it live there if you were watching a couple of moments ago. What looked like protesters wearing BLF t-shirts, staging a very quiet stage march throughout Parliament. Of course, Public Protector Busisiwe Mqobane is making her hearings as well as requests before the Parliamentary Justices Committee. Let's cross back live.
Agreed to leave the room without any inconvenience to yourselves. May we proceed?
Thank you, Chairperson. On the issue of conflict of interest by the Premier, that matter was not investigated, and the matter can gladly be investigated if the complaint is lodged in terms of EMIA. Because, as I've indicated, the focus of the investigation was purely on administration or maladministration and the abuse of state resources by the administration. The referral to Hawks, Honorable Swart, the remedial action didn't include this because already the matter was at an advanced stage, as I've indicated, that the Hawks have already acquired a preservation order against the impacted officials. Indeed, the Public Protector Act does allow one to do that, hence there would be referral to either the DPCI or to some of them. We also refer the SIU to conduct an investigation. And indeed, in the investigation, there was never a point where one is not taking into consideration the provisions and the prescripts and what laws have been violated, especially the Constitution. And that was purely based on what the complaint was, and the investigation focused on the issues which were there. And when the report, because the report, when I joined the office, the report already was at an advanced stage, but then it was not issued immediately when I joined. It was an issue of making sure that I go and see. As I said, I conducted an inspection in loco, but again, I requested further details, especially after meeting with the DA about the complainants, where I requested their information. But that was already, issues have already been determined, and the issue of the prejudice to the complainant, which was also never investigated. I must indicate that that matter was never investigated, hence it was never included as one of the issues, because the complainant focused more on Estina, the agreement which has been signed, whether the procurement processes were followed, whether the prices which were charged by that company were inflated. And I must indicate that the agreement was drafted by the legal department in the Premier's office. Hence, one of the findings is that the disciplinary action should be taken against whoever or the officials, because those officials in the legal department, the way the agreement was drafted as well, it was in such a way that it was, you can consider it as not being properly drafted, and it allowed a lot of leeway for the company compared to protecting the government. And that is part of what the remedial action or the finding was, and the remedial action to that effect was taking disciplinary action. And the decision which was taken by EXCO, Honorable Horn, the information which we have in the report, that decision was taken by the executive, and the provincial treasury was represented in the meeting. But then the process was delegated, or they gave everything to Mr. Tabete to run with the process. If you could see, the agreement has been signed by Mr. Tabete, especially the agreement between Estina and the government. And in the investigation and the records which we are having, all the information was pointing to the relevant officials, hence the investigation concentrated more on them. And on the issue of Mr. Skosana, the public interest, the report, I'm obliged in terms of the Public Protector Act to publish the report. The publication, I can use any form of publication. It's not obligatory for me to call a media briefing. But in this particular instance, the report was published in the Public Protector website. The media statement was issued to this particular instance. So the Section 8, subsection 3 says the report should be published unless there are issues of confidentiality which the Public Protector might decide not to publish the report. So the issue of publishing in the website was part of publishing the report. Honorable Maila, Yes, the report was ready for issuance because the records in the Public Protector Office reflects that the report. The investigators were informed that the think tank decided the report has been finalized. It should be issued in 2015 already, but it was never issued. And the only time the matter was revived, it was when I joined the office, and I had to ask, why are we not issuing this report? Because it's a matter of which is been raised by the executive or the members of parliament in Free State. And I agree with you that the focus, especially of the Public Protector, the Vision 2023, is the focus on the grassroots and empowering the beneficiaries. That particular aspect can be investigated as a separate matter. I think Honorable Bongo asked whether this matter can be opened. I'm functus officio, so that report is issued, is finalized, unless set aside by a court of law. Therefore, if there's there can be a complaint which is lodged, and one can investigate, or then it can be an own initiative where we investigate that part of the beneficiaries. But I must indicate that the judicial review by CASAC has one of the prayers is the report be referred back to the Public Protector for investigation. Honorable Mutapo, indeed, that is a constitutional obligation for accessibility of the public to the Office of the Public Protector, and again repeating the fact that the grassroots are the key, and the issue of the beneficiaries, because most of our reports have an issue dealing with the prejudice suffered by the complainants. Normally that aspect is dealt with, but in this one it was never dealt with because there was no investigation, especially on the prejudice by the beneficiaries. The focus was more on maladministration and all those. But again, as I'm saying, that this matter, when it's brought back to the Public Protector, or then the investigation can be on own initiative to investigate this particular matter. Honorable Mulaudzi, the 30 million on page 4 of the report, whether we have the breakdown, I don't know whether we've checked, colleagues, whether did we check what was that, because we do in the body of the report. You'll see that there is a lot of invoices which we received from some of the invoices which we received from the Free State Department, the ones which I was saying, some of them were received when I joined the office. The lot of resistance was when this matter was investigated. And when the investigation was conducted, there was never a stage where possibly a subpoena is issued, because in terms of the Public Protector Act, you can issue a subpoena, or you can subpoena the documents. And I indicated that when I took over, the report was drafted, and when we issued the Section 79, it's when some of the invoices, they were submitted by the Office of the Premier with the response to the Section 79. So if you go through the report, I think page 5. I think page 5 of the FRIADE report. But I think in the body of the report, I just wanted a page in the body of the report where we are analyzing all the statements. But page 5, what does it say? I think page 5, it does indicate that the top range rotary machine, the cost was 55,000 per point, and for 82 points it was should not have cost more than 4.5 according to Holstein, but then this was charged at 30 million. So that 30 million was the price of this rotary milking machine, according to the information which we received. And then on page 7, you are referring to the issues which were never investigated. Or the contract which was signed by the legal department. I think that I've explained to Honorable Horn that the very same legal department, because we were saying the contract, the way it's drafted, appeared to be not complying to some of the prescripts of the law of contract, and that's one aspect where those officials should be disciplined. The Premier never charged the officials. Ignore that, because in his response, he indicated that after the Accountant General has issued the report, where there was a recommendation to take disciplinary action against the CFO and the CEO, then he indicated that he's waiting for the Public Protector to finalize the report before he can act. So he never acted immediately. So that's one aspect which has been indicated in the report, that he never. So now, because the report is finalized and we indicated that he must take action within 30 days, I think that will be done. My concern also is, as I've raised it, that there was no complaint about the executive, the violation of the Executive Members Ethics Act by the Premier. And there's nothing which is stopping members of the executives to do that as far as this matter is concerned. But this matter, when it was lodged, it focused more on the issue of the way the contract and the resources were utilized. And if it comes to the investigation in terms of EMIA, then that's where the issues of conflict of interest and the issues of the behavior of the Premier in terms of the law will be dealt with in details. And there was a question about whether we have the capacity, because some of the issues we never investigated, especially the one of the death of the cows. It was never investigated because already the Department of Water Affairs and Environment dealt with. And then the other issues, we relied on the report of the Accountant General, because already the value for money aspects were dealt with in that particular report, and there are observations and findings as far as that is concerned. And on the issue of the capacity now, I think there's no capacity in the office, and yes, our budget has been cut further in this financial year, so we don't have the capacity. On the issue of the officials, they've been dealt with, or they'll have to be dealt with. The issue of the Gupta wedding and the Gupta leaks, as I indicated earlier, there was no direct complaint, but then that is not stopping the office from or any complaint being lodged, and we can investigate that particular aspect. Again, not doing own initiative is considering the capacity which the office is having, because the Public Protector Act does allow the Public Protector to conduct own initiative investigation. Honorable Kwabe,
Chairperson.
Mncwabe.
Yes, Mncwabe. My father can really.
My apologies,
contest
Honorable.
that,
Yes, I didn't see you, so I thought they were saying Mncwabe. Honorable Mncwabe. Yes, the report was ready in the think tank. It was discussed and finalized by then, and you saying during the handover, the handover report which I received, the matter was not part of those included, but it was part of the, as I've indicated, it came to the fore when I went to the Free State and there was that complaint that this report should have been issued long time ago. And again, when I requested the beneficiary information, the complainant was also saying, but this report is complete. It was ready for issuance. So it was part of that process of making sure that all the matters which are ready for finalization are dealt with. And I agree with the issue of the beneficiaries. The reopening, it is not possible because of the functus officio rule, and one of the prayers is to take the matter back to the Public Protector. On the issue of the Gupta leaks, the complaints which we've received about the Gupta leaks, which was lodged by CASAC, this matter of Friede was not included in them, and I've mentioned in the statement that some of the issues which were additional to the state of capture, which were not part of the report, the allegations which were relating more on ESCOM and issues relating to high-level information by Minister Mutambi and all those. But the issue of Friede was never part of that complaint. Again, it doesn't stop the complaint be lodged to specifically investigate that particular matter. Thank you, Chairperson.
Members, have you been answered? Can we close this Honorable Skosana?
Yeah, no, thanks, Honorable Chair. Yeah, I think on my part I'm answered, except on one question where I asked about the Public Protector indicated earlier that she struggled to get some of the information from the Department of Agriculture in Free State due to the lack of cooperation. So I then asked as to, is she satisfied where she is seated about the information that she was able to get, as she indicated earlier that she struggled to get some of the information. Is she satisfied that she received the necessary information when she concluded the report? Thanks.
Thanks, Honourable Chair. Look, I don't know if the Public Protector is aware that as we speak now, no action has been taken against individuals pointed in the Friede dairy scandal. As we speak now, Mr. Tabeta is still reporting for duty as usual, as business as usual. Has she bothered to know from the Premier of the Free State, whoever that Premier is, I don't care, what corrective measures has been taken in relation to the report of the Public Protector, in relation to Friede, especially about officials who are implicated? And secondly, I must express our disappointment as as members of parliament, especially speak on behalf of the economic freedom fighters, that the public protector general attitude is pushy-footing on the findings her office makes and adopts an attitude of I don't care. We wonder when will that attitude come to an end? Can I be allowed to speak? Can I be protected, Honorable Chair?
Can we allow the freedom of speech, because it would be difficult to prescribe how people, point of order, let's hear the point of order.
I think it is not correct to attack the person of the public protector. And I think it is not allowed to attack the public protector, particularly in a meeting like that. All I request that the speaker could probably talk about something else, about the work, but not the person of the public protector. Thank you very much.
We have had a report. Can we put questions on the report other than pass judgment? Because the idea is that we must get an account of what happened, not to pass judgment. That belongs to something another time.
Well, I hope you're not sustaining the point of order, because that point of order is in itself entirely out of order.
You as to the approach.
Okay. Okay, thanks so much for not sustaining that out of order, because in itself out of order. Let me proceed.
Excuse me.
This is my last comment.
I just wanted to find out, are you saying that it is correct for the honorable member to attack the person of the public protector? Is that what you are saying?
My answer is that this is the time to put questions, and Honorable Matthias must ask questions, not to attack or pass judgment.
I want to know from the public protector that have she taken trouble on the basis of comparative analysis of what would have been the money or the value of the investigation which was carried out by the Free State Department of Agriculture in Russia on the specifications, the required specifications needed to initiate a project of that magnitude, which cost taxpayers more than 230 million. Whether has such a comparative study or analysis done? If such a study or a service was acquired internally in the country, because I can tell you there are specialists in dairy consultancy and dairy projects who would have provided whatever form of service at price less than what was paid for a study carried out in Russia.
Pumulwane, do you have questions?
Yes. My question was related to what the protector mentioned about the funds being reduced. I thought that we made a recommendation that more money should be given to her. Now, I just wanted to find out, because she talked about
We are still going to come back to that.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chairperson. Mine is a follow-up question. Based on the response of Public Protector on sub judice rule, which literally translated is that one can comment before matters which are before the court. Maybe, Chairperson, one should refer the public protector, as she referred to Section 165, subsection 3 of our Constitution. Also refer the public protector to a recent Concord judgment, Chairperson, of 2014, multi-choice Pty Limited and others versus NPA, and another in Re-State versus Pistorius, and another related matter, 24 citation 2014, 2 in brackets, all South Africa, 446 in brackets GP, whereby it was said that in that Pistorius case, that the, oh, my apologies, the interest of the public to be informed is of paramount importance as compared to the interest of the accused. In that case, it was Pistorius. Thank you so much. So I'm saying that we are not dwelling much into the merits of that particular case, but it doesn't mean that when we mention some aspects relating to that, then we are sort of interfering with what she's alluding to. So my humble submission is that some of the issues that we raised, let her respond to with due respect. Thank you.
You, Honorable Mutapo, I think she has heard for herself that these questions can be answered to without violating the sub-judicature. Over to you.
Thank you, Chairperson. Honorable Skosana, I indicated that, yes, the office struggled to get information. We've indicated in the report when they were investigating. Some of the report, we acquired it late, especially some of the invoices, because all along they didn't have the invoices of procuring the cows, they didn't have the invoices of procuring the milking machine. So some of the information was acquired when we sent in fact, I visited for the inspection in loco, and then some of the information, that's when they got from the Free State. And then when I sent the Section 79 to the Premier, that's when they received, we received certain invoices regarding this particular matter. So the report was dealing with the experiences or the challenges which the office faced when they were investigating the matter. Honorable Matthias, we've given the Premier 30 days to give us the implementation plan and start implementing the report. We'll have to, the 30 days has not yet lapsed, but we'll make sure that we monitor this process very strictly and to make sure that the remedial actions are implemented. And the office and the team, or the Public Protector, we are doing all our best to deal with the investigations, especially the backlog cases, which we are trying to finalize as quickly as we can, so that we can clear the backlog and also find justice for the complainants. The comparative analysis aspect was never investigated, but then page 8 of the report, we've indicated what issues which we never investigated. Whether or not prices for goods, services procured were inflated, especially alleged expenses and respective. So it was issues like that. But then on the issue of the comparative analysis in our investigation, we never did that because also we only checked the prices of Holstein, and there were no other, during the investigation, there were no other companies which were approached in this particular aspect. So hence I indicated that the report focused more on the utilization of resources, especially by the accounting officer after signing the agreement, and whose agreement also we had a finding that it was not compliant. Honorable Mutapo, on the issue of sub judice rule, yes, as it was my opening to say some of the issues I would leave to the court to ventilate on, and especially on the experiences in other matters which were taken to court where some of the statements which the Public Protector has indicated in the media are used in some of the court papers against the office where it's not, the context is also not dealt with. So I would, I agree with you that we'll cooperate fully with the committee on this matter.
Would it be correct to say that this was a project of the provincial government decided by the Premier in Council, and that the officials were merely implementing decisions of government? Now, can you explain to us why the focus is on the implementation by officials, and when there is non-cooperation, wouldn't it have been prudent to go to the principals to say the implementers are not cooperating because the project belonged to the politicians, not to the officials who were implementing?
Chairperson, indeed it was a provincial EXCO decision where all executive sits, and where you find that the provincial treasury is the one which will advise on the aspects of implementation of the project, the resources, how they should be spent. And in this particular instance, the delegated authority of the implementation was given to the HOD of Agriculture, and who also was delegated to sign the very same agreement. The way the agreement was captured or was crafted, but he signed it and he was responsible for implementing. The issue of going to the principals, in the report, we've indicated that there was an interview of Honorable Kabate where the officials were not providing information. And again, the record which I have as an office, there's no record where there was a stage in the past when they were struggling with the information. They issued a subpoena. As I said, the Public Protector, you do have the right to subpoena information or subpoena any person. So in this instance, that was never done. But I said, Chairperson, that when the report was presented and the information, they are mentioning that we don't have the following information from the office. After my visitation, they received more information which they've been requesting. So in this particular instance, we mentioned the lack of cooperation because that's what they've experienced during the investigation. But when we were at the end of the investigation issuing the Section 7(9), some of the information was submitted, but then when they responded, they provided other information. And I agree, Chairperson, that in this particular instance, the unfortunate part is that when the HOD was interviewed, or the responses from the HOD, because that's where the issues of some of the investigations which I've conducted, there's one of Limpopo against the Executive Members Ethics Act investigation, where the MEC was involved in the procurement issues, and that impacted, or the processes were not followed. And the finding was against the MEC and the HOD, because the MEC was involved in that particular process. But in this one, the investigation revealed that this process was driven by the HOD through and through. And you don't find anywhere where you can find, discover that when you interview or when you get documentation, some of the documentation relates to the executive. The only aspect is when the involvement of MEC Kabata, when there was information which they were following up, which we have on our record, when they were following up on some of the information from the Free State.
Can you say that you exhausted everything to ensure that all those that were involved in the executive and in the administration who had to provide answers were given an opportunity to do so before you finalize your report, and that they cooperated with you?
Yes, Chairperson. As far as taking over the matter, again, I still repeat, in the report, the issue of non-cooperation was during the investigation. And on engaging with the officials, I think it was one doctor, I think Masiteng, or when I visited the Friede farm, when I was going around and the officials or the investigators were saying, we're still waiting for all the details or the invoices and the beneficiary details. When they approached them, that information they could get. And from my side, when we wrote the Section 7(9), when the Premier and when they were responding to the allegation.
Right, live visuals there from Parliament. Advocate Busisiwe Mkhwebane in a briefing to Parliament's Justice Committee on matters of public interest. She's been addressing a number of issues as put to her by members. She's been addressing the lack of resources that her office deals with. The Public Protector said that her office has not had the budget to deal with the Gupta links. But MPs have also asked her about the Estina dairy farm investigation and implicated officials. She's also had to discuss the Gupta wedding and field a number of tough questions that have been put to her on controversial issues, but it seems that the MPs aren't happy or convinced by her answers. We'll take you back to Parliament in a short while. For now, we're cutting out of this to bring you some breaking news. Property belonging to the Gupta brothers, including their ancestral home, which the SABC's team visited last week, have been raided and searched by the Income Tax Department of the Indian government. The raid was conducted in their hometown of Sarampur and started at about 10:30 this morning. The premises where the brothers are building a $76 million temple in Sarampur was also searched. Inquiries are being made about their company, Sahara, and property belonging to their family friend, Amar Gupta, was also raided. Officials have seized several documents from these properties. The reason for the raid at this point is unclear, but our Indian correspondent Neha Punia filed this report.
Starting early Tuesday morning local time, a team of income tax officials have begun simultaneously raiding the properties and homes of the Gupta brothers here in India. In their hometown of Saharanpur in the Indian state of Uttar Pradesh, a team of income tax officials accompanied by a police team raided the brothers' ancestral home. Now, this is the same home that SABC had visited only last week. The Guptas are also building a $76 million temple in Saharanpur in the memory of their father, and the premises of this under construction temple was also raided. A mall that the brothers had built in the town was also searched. Several documents belonging to the Gupta brothers have been seized and are currently being scrutinized by Indian government officials. I'm also being told that relatives, friends, employees and neighbors of the Gupta brothers are also being quizzed. Now, the properties of their family friend and close associate Amar Gupta were also raided. Amar Gupta is someone who's been associated with Ajay Gupta for many years now, and he's the one who manages the family's properties and assets in Saharanpur. And these raids are not just limited to Saharanpur. Simultaneous raids are being carried out at all properties that are belonging to or associated with the Gupta brothers across India. Now, income tax officials have not divulged the reason for this raid, but several factors need to be taken into account. Even though the Guptas left India 20 years ago, they've maintained roots here. They visit India at least 3 to 4 times every year, making it a point to stop by in Saharanpur whenever they reach India. And speaking of Saharanpur, they've continued to invest a lot of their money there. They built a mall, an old age home, and last time that they were there, only last month, they were heard telling locals they'll soon begin work on a college and a hospital as well. Neha Punia, SABC News, New Delhi.
All right, the latest developments there coming to you from our Indian correspondent Neha Punia for the developments on the latest raid on property belonging to the Gupta family. We'll bring you more on this as soon as we get details that emerge from that. For now, let's take you back to Parliament, where Advocate Busisiwe Mkhwebane is in a briefing to Parliament's Justice Committee.
Are kept, which anyway that matter was not taken into account, because in the report these expenses, all this is violation of the PFMA by the accounting officer. I mean, the accounting officer violated section 86 of the PFMA, and that borders around the issue of committing a crime, because this is gross negligence by the accounting officer who was given the responsibility to run the finances. Hence, the report reflected this information, and that needs to be, a serious action needs to be taken against the accounting officer, who responded to the Section 79 by saying, whatever the Premier has indicated, yes, it's my response. And I mean, being the person who is given that responsibility to be managing this project, you've signed this agreement and you respond in that particular aspect. Therefore, whatever disciplinary action and whatever criminal investigation, because there is one, it can be part of the findings or the disciplinary hearing, and it should be an issue of investigating the criminality in as far as the expenditure which was conducted by the HOD. So an opportunity was, or the Section 79, which is part of the record, again, which will avail during the review process, is there, and the response from the Premier as far as this matter is concerned.
And Honorable Matthias, and then that will be it. We have to move on after your...
Chairperson, I just want to put a question to the Public Protector to say, can she admit that it was a serious omission from her part to raise the report without investigating the Premier and the MEC, taking into account the report that was given to us, where it is put very clear that the Premier and the provincial government actually ignored some instruction from the Treasurer General, and also the fact that the MEC concerned refused to answer some of the questions. That on its own was not suspicious enough for them to dig into the matter, and the fact that the Premier's son was part of this? Thank you.
Well, I want to agree with Honourable Tillis that I think that's what the public protector must do, admit that there's been an omission on a part. Because I fail to understand, even if there were clear indications that politicians might have been involved in the issuing of instructions and officials only acted on such instructions, that it would be common sense that the public protector in an investigation should ask and investigate politicians and ask uncomfortable questions. And a failure to
Noted, you, Honorable Mpumulo, and I'll come back to
a failure to ask such uncomfortable questions leaves us with many questions than answers. Officials might have been the ones found with their hands in the cookie jar, stealing from the taxpayers' money. But they wouldn't do that at their own behest, at their own volition, without political instructions, and even politicians doing oversight on what officials execute. So ordinarily, politicians should have been asked difficult questions as to what any role, if ever played, of oversight was played by politicians. And failure of showing that they've played such an oversight role, they themselves must answer some difficult questions. Look, here we're dealing with a scandalous project with the value exceeding Okay, I want just to link this with the question I'm about to ask. That is a scandalous project. And if we've ever thought that Nkandla was a scandalous thing, this is worse than Nkandla. With a gate built or erected at that cost. And this is corruption at a supersonic speed. This is corruption at industrial scale, which must be viewed as such and be dealt, and those who are involved in this must be named and shamed. I wanted to get an answer from the public protector. Have you noted all items which were procured, including irrigation equipment and all of that, which were procured by the Free State Department of Agriculture, which is reported on page 70. On page 18, paragraph 2.2.4, that there is stated that the National Department of Agriculture supplied the provincial government with more than 40 million worth of equipment, including irrigation equipment, tractors, and so forth and so forth. So here we're sitting with a serious case where there was double procurement on same items, on same equipment, needed for the same project. I want to know if these equipment that have been procured almost on a replica or duplicating themselves, which amounts to wasteful expenditure, are they recoverable? Can they be recovered? And if not, since they cannot be recovered, is there anyone else who will be taking responsibility in recovering the loss of of taxpayers' money in the procurement of these items? I think there's been a double entry here and double procurement of same items. We need to know if they are recoverable, and if not, is there anyone who will be taking responsibility? The Premier of the Free State and the MEC, I come from that province. They must take individual responsibility. And I'm disappointed in the remedial actions of the public protector. Not a single mentioning of action that must be taken to politicians. We cannot leave this matter unattended to. The Premier and the MEC must individually take responsibility over this mess. It can't just be left like this, as the report seeks to suggest that they should not take any responsibility.
You will be the last.
Thank you. Honorable Chair, I have a problem. It seems there is an indictment on the public protector's work. I thought that we were discussing the report and we look at pros and cons in it. Now, we're raising, I think, the Honorable Telisi and the Honorable Matthias.
Honorable Mpumlwana, I think the opportunity is for you to put your own questions. The public protector is a qualified, competent person to respond to what the members have put to her.
No.
Can we allow you to put your questions? She will attend to that. If they were unfair questions, she's a lawyer, she will be able to deal with that.
Now, Honorable Chair, I think it's important that I raise this matter.
Chair, may I raise a point of order, please?
I think it is important to...
Chair, this committee has engaged robustly with public protectors. You'll recall when Advocate Madonsela was the public protector, this committee engaged very robustly and there was severe criticism of her conduct. Advocate Mpumlwana was part of that. He was part of this committee. So I see no reason why I should continuously try to protect this public protector today. She's more than able to defend herself. And so I would ask that we continue with the meeting because we're wasting time, Chair. Thank you.
For questions, there's no need to protect anybody. The public protector is here to answer questions, and she's capable of doing so. Can we put questions to her and allow her to answer questions?
Thank you, Chairperson. The issue of, I've repeated the answer that based on the complaints which were received in 2013 and 2014 and on issues which the office investigated on, were purely based on the administration of the agreement itself and the finances which were allocated to the project. I wouldn't say even during the investigation by my predecessor whether there was any omission, because the issues were determined then, the report was drafted, and the report which I received was already discussed at the internal think tank, and those were the issues which the think tank agreed on. We don't have the record. I've seen the interview of my predecessor where she was saying she requested the Free State office to request the bank statement and whether she spoke to the Premier about the project, and the Premier referred her to the MEC. I mean, I've also seen that when she was interviewed. In preparation for the Portfolio Committee, I have written responses from the officials from the Free State that when they were saying this matter was discussed at the think tank, the issues as they were captured in that draft report, that's what they worked on, and they don't have any, well, I think it's up to also presenting their side that they don't have anything in writing where they were requested to investigate issues relating to the Premier and the MEC. Again, I'm still repeating that, Honorable Matthias, that there was no omission when I took over and finalized this matter from my side, because already the matter was at a final stage. And again, I think earlier Honorable Horn was saying, but why didn't you extend the scope? I needed to also balance the fact that this report has been issued after the CX report, where there was a lot of criticism why I included the issue of going into the amendment of the mandate of the Reserve Bank to benefit the public. So it was making sure that we stick to the complaint which has been investigated, therefore not take whatever is reported in that particular aspect. And again, I gave an example of the Limpopo matter where the MEC, because of her direct involvement in the procurement of that security company, then there was a finding directly on her, and that it was because that matter was investigated in details. And I must indicate that this matter of the all these expenses which are paid, remember there's a preservation order already granted, or the Hawks applied for that, that has been granted, and that will ensure that whatever monies which were utilized, taxpayers' monies, must be recovered, because this will ensure that that process go to that level. If the officials implicated or during the Hawks investigation, because that relates to theft, which is a criminal conduct, and during the process, if then there is a link to the politicians or whoever is implicated, I think that will help, because if it comes to them, they also have the power to even forfeit the proceeds of crime if the investigation has revealed that. So it's still not yet the end of the road as far as recovering all those wastages which were there in the Free State. And I think again in the investigation it will reflect how the HOD, who was given the responsibility, because there is a criminal case against him if the Hawks can also proceed on that aspect of, and I think he was charged recently as well, or he appeared in court, of the way he grossly misused state resources and has violated, as I've indicated, the PFMA provisions of if you are an HOD or if you are an accounting officer and you are neglecting your responsibility to make sure that state resources are utilized effectively and efficiently. Therefore, that will be dealt with accordingly.
So you have satisfied yourself that the politicians exercise their oversight to the extent that you were in a position to issue a report that is balanced, that covers all the aspects?
Yes, Chairperson. On the report and the issues I've investigated, or the issues which were investigated and finalized on, That's an element which I can say I am satisfied that the key responsibility was on the accounting officer. I have mentioned that the Premier was asked why you didn't take any disciplinary action, and he responded that he was waiting for the Public Protector's report to act on whatever the outcomes can be.
We don't have time, but individual members are free to walk in and out and address the calls of nature. Proceed.
Chairperson, and report on the court judgments. What about the court judgments?
The two courts judgment and the CX reports. We said you will address us on the findings there, and what is your take on those?
Yes, I think I requested a question. I asked a question on the question of funds, and you said that it will come back to that. I don't know, when are you coming back? Are you still going to go to the...
To deal with that, and then you can put your question. Because she has not yet addressed us on that, so it would not be fair that she answers questions on something that has not been addressed.
Chairperson, I thought you would be, because the report was the process which I followed to compile, but maybe on the court judgment, the Public Protector issued a report on allegations of maladministration, corruption, misappropriation of public funds, and failure by the South African government to to implement the CX report and recover the public funds from ABSA. In the aforesaid report, the remedial actions were as follows. The Public Protector refers the matter to the SIU in terms of Section 64C1 of the Public Protector Act to approach the President in terms of Section 2 of the Special Investigating Units and Special Tribunals Act to reopen and amend the proclamation published in order to recover the misappropriated public funds unlawfully given to ABSA in the amount of 1.125 billion, reopen and amend the proclamation in order to investigate alleged misappropriated funds given to various institutions as mentioned in the CX report. And then the last one was the South African Reserve Bank to cooperate fully. You'll remember, Chairperson, the original report which was issued was requesting even Parliament to deal with the issue of the provisions of the Reserve Bank in the Constitution. And that matter I reported the last time also when I was presenting the strategic plan. That remedial 7.2, I agreed that it be set aside by the court. Then on the process of how the court went ahead to hear that particular matter, even after I have said I agreed to the setting aside of that particular provision, that was dealt with. And anyway, the judge decided to issue a judgment on that particular matter, which we've never appealed as an office, because already I've indicated that I'm agreeing to the setting aside of that particular remedial action. And on this particular matter, the matter which judgment was issued, that the referral of the matter to SIU or has made appropriate, she has exhausted the decision as to how the matter must be handled is not that of the public protector. That's what the court found. And the also court found that there were issues of point in limine which we've raised on why the matter was never or addressed by the parties at that particular matter. But then the findings are the matter to refer that was not proper, and there was a cost order on attorney and client scale against the institution and personal cost orders. And the finding on the personal cost orders was based on the issue of the public protector not indicating that there were 2 meetings with the presidency. And also it's based on suspicions that the public protector didn't disclose one of the meetings. Anyway, the meeting which I disclosed was the meeting where the meeting with the legal advisor of the presidency was dealing with this particular aspect. So on that one, and I must indicate that the public protector doesn't just litigate willy-nilly or vexatiously. It was based on the issues relating to the powers of the public protector and how the investigation was conducted. And after having given all the parties implicated in the matter an opportunity in terms of Section 7.9 to respond, the process of fairness was followed. So it was making sure that this matter has been dealt with according to the relevant process. And the judgment, whether it will be appealed, again, that I've engaged the legal team, and we are preparing to appeal that particular judgment, though there are some provisions in the judgment which there was a request for declaratory order by the one of the parties declaring on the issues of the incompetency of the public protector. If we go ahead, possibly it was also an issue of a threat to the public protector that possibly you mustn't investigate other Reserve Bank anymore, or you mustn't appeal any matter when it's brought to court. So that's one aspect.
Advocate Busisiwe Mekobane in a briefing to Parliament's Justice Committee on matters of public interest. The public protector has been addressing a number of issues as put to her by members from the lack of resources that her office deals with. She has said that her office has not had the budget to deal with the Gupta leaks, but MPs have been pressing her on this, asking about the Estina Dairy Farm investigation and implicated officials, to which she has said there was no stage where politicians and executives were being investigated. So she's also had to discuss the Gupta wedding, and she's had to field a number of tough questions questions on several controversial issues. But it seems that MPs aren't happy or convinced by her answers, and it also seems that MPs are not happy about the way that she is seemingly being protected. Busisiwe Mekubani, Advocate Mekubani, being protected from answering some of the questions in this session. We'll take you back there later today. We'll first take a short break, and then I'll have your news at 1 coming up at the top of the hour.